Welcome, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Horror Tuesday. I am so excited about today. I have my lovely co-host, Leon. Hi, Leon.
Hey,
I feel like this should be a permanent thing.
I wouldn't be opposed. Going straight from tinfoil haters into this every day, get them raids going. I would love it. Again, this is such a monumental sort of thing. I'm excited.
I am too. So before we get into that, housekeeping, please subscribe to the channel, share the stream as well. Subscribe to Leon. His links will be in the description below. So today is very special. Today, I don't know if everybody remembers, about 2 weeks ago, Leon and I did a deep dive into the new George Romero Resident Evil documentary that is out on Amazon Prime now. I was very lucky for the director to comment on that video and connect with, so we have him as a guest tonight. So that is very excited. I do have a QA happening over on chat, so if you do have questions for the director, please submit them there. And yeah, I think we'll just bring on
minimum $3 super chats for a question. Your girl got to eat.
I don't know about that. No. That's all right. But I do see everybody in the chat. Thank you guys so much. I would go through every single one of you, and I will go through the super chats. Thank you guys so much to be here. But I do want to bring our guests on and just get started. So let's go ahead. Hi, Brandon. Welcome.
Hi. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. As you could tell, I'm very excited about this, Leon, as well. Thank you so much for giving us some of your time today to talk about the documentary.
Again, thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
And thank you for looking like a perfect live action casting of Barry Burton. So
now,
sorry, no, I know you don't know much about Resident Evil. That's a character in the games, so
it's okay. Well, that brings up a good point. I did want to ask you right off the bat: are you also a Resident Evil fan? On top of being a George Romero? Really?
Absolutely. Oh yeah, okay. I got all my props and games and.
Oh, that's cool.
I mean, this is about how hardcore I am, if I can.
That's a PS1 copy of a Japanese copy of Resident Evil 2, isn't it?
Yes, and
the
zombie on the cover is actually from George's commercial, so I always thought that was kind of cool.
So how did your love of both Resident Evil and George kind of meet to do this documentary?
Well, actually, it kind of collided with the release of the original Resident Evil 2 back in '98. I had seen some of George's films. I watched Night of the Living Dead when I was like 5 or 6. Scared the hell out of me. I didn't watch any zombie films for like a decade. So I'd seen bits and pieces of Creepshow. But it wasn't until Christmas of '97 I saw the American commercial for Resident Evil 2. And I was already into horror. I loved films. And this thing just felt like an amalgamation of everything that I loved about horror. So I ended up playing the game and then played the first game after that. And I was hooked. I mean, obsessed. I had shirts, toys, comic books, novels. I had everything. So when the rumors started that George Romero was going to be making the movie, which on the Resident Evil 2 logo, it's even had the announcement saying that you could win a part in the movie. I realized that I needed to go back and watch more of his films. I wanted to see more of an idea on what it would be like if he directed a movie. So thankfully, '98 was the 20th anniversary of Dawn of the Dead. So that was all over cable, the premium channel. So I watched that, got to see Tom Savini's remake of Night of the Living Dead, went back and watched the original Nights all day. And I was hooked. I was like, this is the guy. This is the guy. And then, of course, the Japanese commercial, the live action commercial that George had done, it was leaking on the internet. So, all in all, like, I felt really hyped up to have George as the director. So that's where it kind of came together. So when it didn't happen, I was pulling together bits and pieces over the years. Like, I was obsessed with trying to get the script. So when it leaked, I read that thing so fast. The printer, it's like one of those like old ass printers slowly printing each page. I was reading each page multiple times, waiting on the next page to print out. So after George's passed, um, I had done a video on YouTube. I used to be a YouTuber for about 2 years.
Oh, then you're experienced. You
Yeah.
know, you get it.
I know the struggle. I was never satisfied with the video I made talking about George's script. I just felt like, oh, well, I could talk about different things. There's got to be more information. So slowly,
May I ask, are you already a filmmaker by this point, or have you not gotten to that career
No.
yet? Okay.
No, what had happened was I was going to redo the video as a YouTube video. And then I partnered up with Robbie McGregor, who's been involved in the Resident Evil community for decades. And he had written an article back in, let's say, 2013. I'm not sure when exactly it was, 2010. It's been a long time. I've known him since the Biohazard Extreme website, which is from like 1999. So I had helped him uncover some of the information on the Alan McElroy script, because that was kind of lost. It was just buried in an old issue of PlayStation Magazine. So I asked him, if he wanted to collaborate, maybe try and work on kind of an expanded video about it. So he agreed. And then we started uncovering a lot more information and like little bits and pieces of the story. And then we realized, we wanted to talk about George and his legacy since he had passed, and then talk a little bit more about the video games. And then that's when we found out that the scripts were available, that they were opening the Romero archive. And we felt like then we're like, we could probably make a full documentary. We might be able to get interviews with people. And we were both kind of connected throughout the community, and it just kind of went from there. So this was around the time of the pandemic. So what had happened was we couldn't get into the archive for about 18 months due to all the restrictions. And around that time, I just felt dissatisfied as a YouTuber. And we were already looking at like, man, this would make kind of a neat documentary, something non-YouTube. So I ended up shutting down my YouTube channel. And then I just decided, I always wanted to be a filmmaker. I tried a couple of times in life. I ended up going into the military for 12 years. And then by the time I get out.
Thank you for your service.
Oh,
Yeah.
Thank you. It's kind of, it feels like a different life, like especially now.
It actually seems a lot of military personnels, or do you kind of lead into film work? I mean, look at Tom Savini itself, especially back in the day in the special effects realm of horror movies.
I mean, it's I don't know. Like I've just felt like the skill sets I bring over from the military is just being like very organized with how I want to get a project together. And of course, having like a proper chain of command and, that kind of environment I can excel in. But also filmmaking is very chaotic. Yes. Stuff collapses in, stuff breaks. There's people that aren't showing up, and you have to like work on the fly. Where, I was a grunt. I was over in Iraq and stuff. So I kind of knew what it felt like to be inside of a chaotic environment. So like for me, like I thrive on that. And some of the people I've worked with have been, really impressed with my ability to basically have anything thrown at me, and within like 2 minutes, I have an answer on how to solve it. It's so, but yeah, so all of that kind of led together into me sitting down and just saying, you know what, I'm going to do this one more time. I'm going to try and start a career as a filmmaker. And I was just getting into the convention scene and starting to meet people. And next thing you know, it was like a domino effect. One thing led to another. And this is where I'm at now. Now I have a documentary.
Well, I will say I have I've known obviously of George Romero. I come from a special effects horror background, so he's always been an idol or somebody I've always wanted to meet. I always compare him to Stan Lee in a sense, like the Stan Lee of horror, right? For a lot of people. And where did your love of horror come from prior to thinking of this? Have you always been into it growing up, or
My love for horror actually came from my mother. Um,
same?
she really loved horror films, and my father, he was more of a Clint Eastwood, John Wayne kind of dude. He liked Dirty Harry and Rio Bravo, stuff like that. So he didn't really care much for horror. He used to affectionately refer to it as that weird shit. So I
My
always
dad
laugh.
does too.
I always laugh at that. I love
Yeah.
my father. So my mother never had anyone to watch horror films with. So I was already kind of getting into horror on my own. I really liked like I had dinosaur books and monster books and like all this stuff that my parents would get me. So I was already moving toward the idea of horror. And she had this crate. It was just a small little crate, and it was filled with VHS tapes. And it was like all these old horror films, The Fog, Alice, Sweet Alice, Night of the Living Dead. I forget some of the others, but it was just a lot of the classic horror films in there. It was really neat. So I would always watch horror films with her. She got me into Nightmare on Elm Street and Leprechaun, and I started getting an interest in the Alien films, and I had her watch those with me. So it was a lot of back and forth, introducing each other to different horror films. So I have a lot of fond memories of time spent with my mother. But yeah, that's how I got into it, and it just so happened that she had a George Romero film in that crate.
So with that, what off the bat, what would you say is your favorite horror movie? I know that's a hard question for us in the genre, but what's one that like comes to mind right off the bat?
I would say that my favorite horror film, even though I'm a George fan, my favorite horror film, and I feel like it's probably up there as one of the most perfect horror films of all time, it has to be John Carpenter's The Thing.
That's such a based
Brandon,
answer.
you and I just became best friends just now. That is like my number. That's the movie that
it has
the special effects.
Yeah, you look at it, it's a creature feature. It has a very well-rounded cast of likable characters. It has gore, but on top of that, it's a very thought-provoking movie. It makes you think. You can't just turn your brain off and watch the thing. It's constantly making
No, you can't do that as an
question.
11 version, but
Yeah, you can do that.
sorry.
I will say, in the defense of the 2011 version, I feel like that was something where there's too much studio meddling. I had actually read the leaked version of the script, and I felt like that worked better. There was certain scenes that were changed, I guess, to make it a little bit more American-centric, whereas the original script definitely tried to keep up the idea of language barriers and not being able to understand one another. There's and that's something that you could say is like a very George Romero thing, where people can't work together to solve a problem. They just further their own demise. And I really like that aspect of the 2011 thing, the script.
Mhm.
But me personally, I felt like if that movie had to be made, they really needed to tone it down some and just do the whole thing in Norwegian. It should have just been completely native language, not in English. They should not have had American characters. It should have been it should have felt more like someone from Norway filming this movie, doing their culture, their people, their language, and doing almost like the Norwegian version of The Thing. If they had done that and just really leaned hardcore into that, I think it would have been a much more successful film, rather than trying to take a concept take a film that was already like very niche. It's a cult classic. It was not a successful film when it released, but trying to take that and then make it more Hollywood, like bigger. We're going to show you inside the ship, and we're going to have these big set pieces, and we're going to have we're still going to have American characters, even though it's the Norwegian camp. Like, it just felt a little bit too much. And I don't think you really needed to do too much with that film, besides just have the Norwegians find the saucer, get the creature, and then all hell breaks loose inside the camp.
I would also add, and this is my preference, that because the original plan was to go full practical, and then this, like you said, studio interference made them rely heavily on CGI. I think full practical would have done a lot for that film as well.
Yeah,
I've seen some of the footage for the practical effects. Some people have sent me like some of the original footage, and it's like, we should have just went with that. It doesn't look bad at all.
practical always looks better. In my opinion, CGI is overused in movies. It's supposed to be, oh, something messed up on set, or we just need to add a little bit more. Not so much that is the main focus to do these effects for. Practical ages better too, as well. I mean, look at the thing now. If I watch it now, I think it looks better than a lot of movies that have used CGI in the last 5 to 10 years for their effects. I do have some questions for you from the audience that I can't pull up because it's on the YouTube side. So Uncle Gus asked, which do you prefer, Resident Evil 2, the original, or Resident Evil, the remake?
That's actually a very good question, because I played both. I really liked what they did with the remake. I really enjoyed the police station. I really enjoyed just how much they took the original concept and amplified it. With that being said, the more that I played that game, especially after I left the precinct, I started feeling like there was something missing, and I couldn't quite like pin it down. So after I played Resident Evil 2 Remake, I went back and played the original game, both scenarios, and I was like, I can't describe it. I've slowly pieced together what it is that I like about that original game, but it just hit home. The original just hits differently for me. And I think part of it too is because there's some sort of disconnect between the game and the player, whereas the remake really immerses you in what's going on. It's very detailed. It's got the Hollywood atmospheric lighting, and everything is perfect. It just looks like you're playing through a horror film. There's something about the original games that feel like you're playing through these dioramas, and everything is not overly detailed. Even the backgrounds have a lot of detail to them, but there's a little bit of fuzziness to it. And I feel like it allows your imagination to fill in gaps. And I just love the colors. It feels very comic bookish. Resident Evil 2 just feels like George Romero's Dawn of the Dead, but set in a police station. And I've talked with fans before about, I love the remakes, don't get me wrong, but I do love the originals, and it's not, with a little asterisk that says, they were good for their time, or, for what they are. Like, I love the original games, and I feel like the originals feel more like video games, whereas the newer ones feel more like they're trying to tell a story. And you're getting a lot more tutorials. Like, I was very disappointed starting up Resident Evil 2 and having to play through the convenience store where it's slowly teaching you how to play the game. And it's like, I remember playing, like, my first time playing a Resident Evil game, they show you, Leon and Claire getting into the city. They wreck the police car, and then everything explodes. And the next thing you know, it's, they were parted by an inescapable destiny, And then it just starts, and there's 10 zombies just swarming you. And you're like, I don't even know how to work these fucking controls.
It's literally trial by fire, because the cop car and everything is on fire. And I mean, I am in 100% agreement with you. Remake wise, I actually don't like the third and fourth remakes. I think the remake of 2 is the best of the remakes, but the original trilogy on the PlayStation 1 is honestly an unparalleled trilogy when it comes to that era of gaming. Like you said, no asterisk for its time. I, to this day, think that Resident Evil 2, and frankly 3 is actually my favorite, are better than the vast majority of games we even get nowadays.
I'm very much a fan of the original. I love Resident Evil 2. That's what got me into the series. But it's something about that old dark house concept and just the weird absurdities of it. You know, you have this paramilitary police force, and they're inside of a really old mansion, and there's puzzles, and there's like a weird menagerie of monsters. You know, you have zombies, and there's a giant snake, and you know, the first game was just kind of all over the place, and not all the scenes connect together because that game was technically never finished. You know, they just kind of buttoned up the edges in order to make it a complete game, but there's a lot of stuff they just never got to. So there's a lot of weird things about it that don't mesh up well. But I love that.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Did you ever play the 2002 remake of the first game?
Oh yeah. I own both
PS5
remaster, and I own copies of the original.
Nice.
Like when I say I'm a Resident Evil fan, I'm a Resident Evil fan. Like
okay, sorry, that may have sounded patronizing. Then my bad.
No. Like I can understand some people don't have all the games, and I don't have all the Resident Evil games, but I have the ones that matter.
Okay, so to you, where does it stop mattering? Out of curiosity, because every Resident Evil fan is very divided on that particular question because it's gone through so many identity crises as a series.
Like what I think Resident Evil is.
Yeah, like where do you think it's like stopped being Resident Evil, or where do you consider the disconnect of like what the games that do matter?
Basically, when did it become a shitty game? like simplify it.
My thoughts on the entire series is this: the Resident Evil is classic Resident Evil from 1996 to about 2004. The Outbreak games were some of the last stuff that really felt like classic Resident Evil.
You are a fan. You played the Outbreak games, so you're a fucking fan, son. Oh, damn.
I played Resident Evil in the Game Boy Color, and that didn't even release. I was just playing Resident Evil 1.5 today, the prototype for 2.
The where you with like Elsa Walker and
yeah.
That's awesome.
I was playing that, and I have some of the trial editions, like it's the stuff they played at game conventions back in 1995 for Resident Evil 1.
Wow.
I have some of those. Like I'm a hardcore fan. I love just playing this stuff. So, but no, like Resident Evil to me, like its identity was solidified in those games from 1996 to 2004. I will say that through a bunch of different decisions and also the changing culture, that the game series did start to stagnate. And I think some of the original fans might try and claim like Resident Evil was just always doing well, but it really wasn't. And I can remember reading lots of articles that were really starting to talk down on the series because
Code Veronica got blasted when it came out. And to be fair, it was on the Dreamcast, which already wasn't doing well, so that didn't help it either. Yeah, Code Veronica got blasted.
Yeah, absolutely. And people were saying these things feel dated. You know, we're already moving into like the PS3 era, and we're playing games that are haven't really changed since 1996. So, it's already like 2 generations behind. But I was not a fan of the action trilogy. I played Resident Evil 4, 5, and 6. I only made it through Leon's campaign in 6 because
that's the only good one. So you're not
they said that was the most like the classic games. It was the most horror. And after playing it and beating it, I was like, man, I didn't even enjoy this. I'm not going to enjoy the other ones. So I never got to play, Chris and Sherry's campaigns. But no, I still consider them Resident Evil, but they're kind of like this weird amalgamation of shifting game concepts, and then they're taking inspirations from the movies. And it was one of those things where they kind of threw out everything to make a game. And the only thing that was really anchoring 4, 5, and 6 to the series was, you had Leon and Chris, and Wesker pops up in a game, and there's Ada. So you're getting some of the classic characters. And there's like little bits and pieces that connect into the lore, but the games themselves were just really different. And then you had 7 and 8 show up, and they kind of did the same thing. They threw everything out. You only got little bits and pieces. Now, I was a huge fan of 7. Like, I swore off the series after 6, and I just said, well, the games have moved on. They're no longer what I enjoy playing, and that's fine. But I don't think I can buy another Resident Evil game and sit there. Like
after 6, I had the same mentality as you.
I just could not continue doing that. I just felt like I needed to put my money elsewhere, and I was like, well, this franchise has moved on. It's not for me. I still have the original games. And then the trailer for 7 dropped, and I was like, holy shit. This is what I've been missing, because I don't know what's going on, and I like that. And then I got to play beginning hour, and I guess it was kitchen, then midnight, and then beginning hour, because they kept updating it. And I got to play
with the demos,
and I got to play it in VR. And I was like, holy
that's
shit.
awesome.
Wow,
I never played it in VR.
Yeah.
That's
Oh,
awesome.
no, okay.
I'd be too scared. To play it in VR.
As a Resident Evil fan, you need to play it. At least get the demo if you can find it. Play it in VR. Go ask a buddy. Find whatever you can do, but play that hour-long demo in VR. It is fucking amazing to see the dust particles dropping in front of you. There's depth perception. And you're like, you just get transported. You're like, holy fuck, I am inside the Resident Evil universe.
I am a big scaredy cat.
Well, it is terrifying. It is terrifying.
Capcom's marketing for that was brilliant, because I'm sure you remember this. They even released a scented candle that was supposed to be the scent of that swampy mansion. And when you light, it smells terrible. So when you've got the headset on, you're also experiencing the smells of this rotting wood. It's like, oh, that's
about the only thing I didn't do, but that sounds like a really cool idea, is to try and track that down and get that, just so you can burn it and smell it while you're playing. Like, that just completes it, because you already have like the 3D audio, and then you got everything's in your vision. It's very believable. So I really enjoyed 7. Now, it's not without its criticisms. Don't get me wrong. I have a list of them. But for the most part, I was so happy to have something that felt like classic survival horror. But again, that game, it was very divisive, because it did the exact same thing the middle trilogy did, which was they threw everything out. Different point of view, new character. In this case, it's even worse, because they have new characters, new story. Really, none of the characters show up except for Chris. And they have like little bits and pieces of lore that connect everything to the games, but it's very loose. But I liked it, though, because it brought me back to that Resident Evil 1, Resident Evil 2 era, where the universe wasn't fleshed out. And all of a sudden, I'm like, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what these things are. I don't know what these monsters are. I'm in... Like, they did a very good job of just selling the idea of you are in a brand new place, and you're alone. So I love that.
Well, the other question Uncle Gus has for you is favorite scene, sequence, cutscene, boss fight, whatever, etc., from all of the Resident Evil games that you played, if you had to pick. Now, I know we'll probably, between you and Leon, be here for probably 6 hours. Yeah, so give me like your top favorite ones that you can think of.
Oh, man. Okay, so one of my favorites is from Resident Evil 2, Leon's B scenario, where he gets confronted by Mr. X, and Ada shows up. She starts shooting the tyrant, and it, smacks her away, and actually when you play for the first time, she's mortally wounded. And there's this really great scene, and the voice actor for Leon, Paul, he did such an amazing fucking job. God rest his soul. He passed away a few years ago.
Just very young. Paul had died.
But he did such an amazing job. And when he's screaming her name, it's like fucking chills running down your spine, because he it's just him holding Ada as she just fades away. and just dies right in his arms, and he just screams. And they do it with a wide shot, if I remember correctly.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
don't hold it and like go. Yeah,
because they don't usually do those shots in those games, but
Mhm.
that particular shot, yeah, you're 100% correct with a wide shot.
So that's one of my favorite scenes because it was like the first instance where I went, "Holy fuck, this is like a melodrama. Like this is like really good storytelling." The other scene I really liked is I always liked anything with Nemesis. I like Nemesis. And then I was really impressed with I think it's out the first Outbreak game. The credit sequence is the entirety of Umbrella's soldiers with Hunk going through the sewers fighting
right?
Yeah, with the monster William Birkin, and there's this really beautiful score that's being played. There's no, if I remember correctly, there's no sound effects, no talking. It's just this like really beautiful symphony. It's like an orchestra playing. It's very beautiful, very creepy, very sad. It's and you're just seeing bits and pieces of this monster shredding these soldiers, and it's the beginning of the outbreak. It's how the outbreak starts because they show the rats coming in, eating the canisters of virus and eating the dead bodies of the soldiers. So that's a really cool, creepy scene, and then it like pans up and like goes up out of the sewers out of the vents, and then you see you're in Raccoon City. So that was really cool.
Well, you mentioned symphony and orchestra, and so I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up in the documentary itself, which I know we're probably going to get into more, but in a little bit. But your guys' use of Moonlight Sonata, again, as a Resident Evil fan, the where you would place and whatnot was just expertly done. Like I'm a musician, I love sound design, love editing, but also a big fan of Resident Evil. So like where it was placed, the moment you used it was just chef's kiss, fantastic in the doc. So well done on the Moonlight Sonata level.
The music was done by Dwayne Carlton Merritt. Wonderful dude. He worked with us. He like delivered an entire score. And then Tom Robinault, who was the cinematographer and editor, he helped place most of the music. And then I came in and was just like, let's tweak it here. Let's put this song over here. I just kind of arranged it along with him to just kind of get it exactly where I wanted it to be. But no, Dwayne did an amazing job. Very skilled. He really nailed the Resident Evil feel of even the original scores in it. And then doing like these slight tweaks and variations. And, he had actually said like he felt like he needed to be part of the project just because most of his musical inspiration came from the original games. So a lot of his style,
that director's cut.
Yeah. It's having someone like that who the reason why he got into playing music is because of those games. It's like, okay, you're the perfect composer to do this.
I joined the police academy because of the games. I'm gonna be real. Like, that's literally the reason I became a cop. So
every stream, Leon, I learn more and more about you. You just drop these Easter eggs.
You play Resident Evil 2 in 1998. Tell me that didn't leave an impression on your psyche if I want to be a cop. Like, let's be real.
I was a House of the Dead chick. I played that instead, so didn't play Resident Evil. But it was interesting watching your documentary because the little bit critiques I had about it actually were corrected by Leon, because Leon, I would be like, well, what about when there would be font on the screen, and Leon's like, no, that's a nod to the game. I was like, oh, that makes sense. That puts it in perspective for me.
So I checked Rotten Tomatoes, by the way, because you backstage you were saying that there were some folks that were relatively critical of the documentary. So I was like, I wonder what Rotten Tomatoes has to say. Because first of all, I'm a Rotten Tomatoes hater. Fuck them. They're literally just. I'm going on a diatribe about Rotten Tomatoes. Point is, one of these dumbass negative reviews says, starting as a mini tribute to Romero's foundational influence to the zombie genre, which, by the way, we'll get to, because your Romero stuff, this is not just a Resident Evil documentary.
Yeah.
Romero coverage is beautiful. As a massive Romero fan, the film finally sells into a well-researched but almost audiobook-like presentation, and the way giving it a bad review for being an audiobook-like presentation shows that you do not understand the source material. You're writing this review without knowing that that's how the way I as a Resident Evil, fucking loved that. You were conveying the information both visually through all the behind-the-scenes stuff, but also for fans of the game, the way that you get information in those original games. Like, you married the two beautifully. And for these stuck-up fucking reviewers that don't know source material, oftentimes don't give a damn about source material, to give a negative review based on that, I think is frankly bullshit. But it's just me.
I thought it was, I thought it was kind of interesting to do it that way, because a lot of documentaries, especially if you got, let's be real here. If you go and watch a documentary on the Civil War, they're not exactly interviewing people that fought in the Civil War.
Yeah.
It's almost all fucking excerpts from journals and field battle reports, and then they bring in some experts and personalities to talk about it. And unfortunately, with this case, it's very similar to that. A lot of the major players have unfortunately passed on. It's been 27 years since George wrote that script. Constantine has had the license to make the movies almost as long as the games have been released. They got it probably around the fall of 1996, and the first game came out in March of 96. So they probably had it like 6 months after the first.
And Constantine still has, if I recall, because they're actually working on a yet another Resident Evil series. Now, to be fair, a fantastic director doing it. Kreger's the guy behind like Barbarian, the recent companion film. I believe he's the one who's going to be taking on the Resident Evil next, unless I'm misremembering.
No, you're right. It's him, and Shay Haddon is writing the script, who wrote the scripts for John Wick Chapter 4, Army of the Dead, Rebel Moon. I may or may not have read the script for it. Okay. But
hypothetically, what do you think of it? Hypothetically. It's okay. I figured you can't.
The cameras are off, because I'm very curious.
Yeah. We'll talk backstage.
Yeah. I want to. It'll be interesting seeing how many people trash Romero's script, claiming it's the worst script.
Okay, let's talk about that for a moment. If you're okay. Oh, sorry. Go on, Nadia. It's your show. My bad.
What do you think of the current IP of Resident Evil that has been movies and the 1 season TV show, and then
that doesn't exist,
Raccoon
Nadia.
City? I know, but what are your thoughts after doing all this research into Romero's script and seeing how much they screwed him over with this?
That's a typical Hollywood story.
Yeah.
It's George did not have a successful career in the 90s. But funny enough, he made the most amount of money. He made more money in the 90s than any other decade combined.
Wow.
So but he never made anything. He just worked for almost every single studio, and he was getting paid just to write, and not make anything. So he made a lot of money, but unfortunately his career suffered as a result of it, because it was getting much harder to get projects done. Because you're only as good at, everyone always goes back and looks at your last film. And when you haven't worked for 10 years, it becomes a lot harder to find out whether you're a bankable name. He did get Bruiser out by 2000, but, there was definitely a shift,
Well, and as much as I love Romero, I think that Diary of the Dead, for example, is honestly a very weak entry in the Of the Dead franchise. I don't think it does the previous, even 4 films justice. I even have some love for Land of the Dead, even though it's easily the weakest of the 4. I think Diary of the Dead, it's. I wouldn't say he had a fall from grace. He still had great work, but the Of the Dead saga suffered after Day of the Dead, which, to be fair, is very underrated in my opinion.
Okay, I'm going to make you have a second opinion.
Oh, let's hear it.
Okay, so Land of the Dead had massive amounts of studio interference. In fact, George had a completely different script that was called Dead Reckoning, and he had to throw it out because there was a lot of similarities. Basically 9/11 happened, and because of some of the stuff that was in the script, that was that weird time in Hollywood where like no one wanted to touch anything that dealt with certain issues or showed certain
Yeah,
things. Like I still remember Fight Club. Remember Fight Club? They were thinking about banning it or cutting out the ending because of the characters demolishing tower. Yeah. That was a real time period. And unfortunately, he almost got that thing greenlit. And then 9/11 happened. So he had to completely rewrite this thing. He had to work within the studio system with Universal. And from what I was told, he wasn't getting the actors that he wanted. He got some of the actors, but they also had to hire a lot of Canadian actors because it was Canadian production. And I still remember that originally the main character, Riley, was supposed to be African American. And I talked to one of George's friends and said, you were around during that time period. Is that true? Because I remember reading a review somewhere where someone got a hold of the script and was talking about it. And they mentioned Riley being African American. And they said, yeah, he didn't get it because they hired another actor. George didn't get his pick. So he made.
And let's be real, John Leguizamo is not a leading man in an action film or a horror film.
No, but I like him. I like him in Land of the Dead.
I think he's. I buy his character, but I don't think he's leading man material in terms of I think there are other actors that could have done it better, especially if the character wasn't. It was supposed to have a certain look and whatnot about him. In this case, be African American. If the character was written like that,
no. Riley is the other lead.
My bad. Okay.
So what George did is he made Big Daddy African American, and Big Daddy got a little bit more of a prominent role in the film, being the lead zombie. But from what I was told, and it's even in the documentary, George really hated working in that studio system. He had an offer to do, probably Land of the Dead 2 or whatever. And he passed on it. That's why Diary of the Dead and Survival of the Dead are so low budget. He said he'd rather just make a low budget film, go back to being independent, go back to his roots, and just stay away from the studio. And Diary has a lot of really cool stuff about it. I mean, it's very much, back then it was not as popular. And one of the reasons it was laughable by a lot of people because they said no one would see all this horrible stuff and continue filming.
Oh yeah, that's in modern day, and people are filming on the subways, and other people are getting beaten to death. So yeah.
So and Survival. I have a lot of love for Survival because I know some of the people that were involved in it. Some of them I consider friends, and to me, it's like it's not a perfect film, but none of George's films are perfect. I mean, let's be completely honest. Dawn is not a perfect film. And, if you were to just take a common person to sit that down and you look at the quality of Dawn and you look at the quality of, say, Halloween or even The Shining, which is only 2 years later, there's a huge quality difference. And I'm not saying George is a bad director.
Oh, not at all. You made a whole documentary about that.
He just had less money. And he had a much bigger vision than what even those films had. It was interesting to always compare that. And I always have to remind, even some of my friends who are huge Romero fans about that. We love Dawn of the Dead no matter what problems it has, because the story is so fucking good. And you love those characters so much that any sort of issues that there are within the frame, you just completely block them out because you're too engrossed in the film. And that's the power that Romero has. Survival of the Dead, I love because it's George's swan song. And I love the fact that he went out the same way he came in. He was never a sellout. He never, he didn't go, I hate to say
Sam Raimi.
Well,
there's some directors that they got their $100 million budgets and they're doing CGI films, and they're just getting a paycheck. And George never did that. He always felt like his films needed to represent what he wanted to talk about.
Well, I think that's why why he has such a huge fan base and such admirations from people is that even if he didn't have the big budget, the story is there, the creativity is there, the heart is there in his movies. And there are some movies that might have a huge budget, but something will take you out of it if the story is not there, if it just doesn't flow well. Where his stuff, you could see like they could use ketchup for blood and have really bad effects and maybe some cheesy lines, but the heart of it, the story of it is there and it captures you. So you're willing to forgive some of the visual stuff because he didn't have the budget for it. But yeah, it's like some directors nowadays will go, all right, I'll make your $1 million movie with studio interference. If I'll make 10 of them for you, if I get to make the one dream project I want to do. And I admire George for like, no, I want to, what I put out, I want it to be from me. I want this to be full hands-on George Romero, no studio interference, nothing like that. This comes from me. And that's one of the things I admired about him when I was growing up watching his movies. I have another question for you.
All right.
Slow shuffling zombies, like Romero's on that, or fast zombies, like
Slow.
28 Days Later. Slow or something else? It was the other question. All right. Well, I have a question about, let's get into the documentary. We've talked a lot about it. What motivated you? I know in the beginning you were talking about your path into becoming a filmmaker and the ups and downs of it. But what made you go full 100% tunnel vision onto this project to get this out, to commit to it?
I mean, it was just it was kind of weird. Like I originally didn't plan on this being my first project, and I think a lot of people are kind of surprised when I tell them this is the first thing I've ever made. I never made a home movie. I have no short films. I have nothing. It's this. This is what I did. So I think I had one guy who interviewed me, and he was also a filmmaker, and he was like, I say this half joking, but he's like, as someone who's been struggling for almost 15 years to break in and actually like get some sort of recognition for my work, he's like, and you did this with one film. He's like, fuck you. Like that was his remark. He's just like, fuck you. And so, but no, I originally did not want this to be my first project. It was something we were supposed to work at. I had I actually still have scripts for like 10-minute shorts. I wrote like a bunch of them. And unfortunately, the project just kept pulling me back in. More work needed to be done. More attention needed to be put on it. Someone would come to me and say, hey, I got, the original Chris Redfield. Or, hey, we just, I want to introduce you to J.J. Truelock of Residents of Evil. And then it's like, oh, we found Norman England. It's.
Can I say, Romero, thank you for that, by the way, for being, there was a couple of like YouTube personalities you put in this documentary, and it sort of gives credence to things like what Nadia and I do, is people who do commentate on culture and care about this sort of stuff. And for the longest time, we're laughed at for it. Like, oh, it's like seeing the Residents of Evil guys, and I guess it was just I'm blanking on his name, but like it's like, oh my god, he got Residents of Evil is in this. That's a major get for like our sort of community and culture, and it bridges those gaps between old world film and the modern zeitgeist of commentary. So
well, I mean when you look at someone like James Rolfe, who has like 3 million subscribers to his channel, and he does a lot of movie reviews, and he talks a lot about how George Romero inspired him, and he had a big love for it. He didn't play the games. He knew George Romero, and it was like, well, I had met James like years ago, just like a meet and greet, like shake his hand, get an autograph. Okay, see you later. But I was like, man, I'd really like to, get this guy in here, because I feel like he would really appreciate kind of bridging the gap, because he's only ever done like one video on Resident Evil.
And it was Resident Evil Survivor, which, as much as I love it, is a shitty game.
Well, I mean, it was part of his shitty game series.
Yeah, that's true.
So I mean, he picked a very good entry. So it was very interesting, like getting to communicate with him, and this is someone that had originally inspired me to be a YouTuber, but I was always in awe. I saw Angry Video Game Nerd when it was Angry Nintendo Nerd back in like 2005. Like I think it was even before YouTube.
He actually originally had them as shorts, like on a completely different, like on a different website, YouTube. Yeah. YouTube didn't roll on until 06, and then he was convinced to re-upload to YouTube. Yeah, you're correct.
So it was really neat to kind of come full circle with all that. And then same thing with JJ. JJ has almost 500,000 followers. He's the one thing I love about JJ is he's very, very positive. He's not really getting caught up in a lot of the drama. And the last couple of years, I've really gotten to know him, and he's honestly a very, very good dude. And he has really interesting ideas on what he wants to do with his company, and he wants to break out into filmmaking, and make movies as well. And it's like, dude, let's connect here. I want to have you on, and I want you to talk about, as one of the largest Resident Evil channels. Like, I want you to talk about that from the point of view of a fan. Like, what was it like playing the original games? What did they mean to you? What did seeing George's commercial mean to you? What was watching the films like? And I felt like in a way that would hopefully connect and resonate with some of the fans that, they were being represented. It wasn't just, people that are working in video games or working in film talking to them, but they'd see another person. It's like, oh, that's just like me. That was kind of the point of it, was I wanted someone that a lot of the fans would recognize and hopefully connect with to kind of represent them.
Well, bang up job on that. It really worked for the point of view of fans. So,
I mean, it brought Lee and I together on this. I'm more of a Romero fan. I've never played the Resident Evil games. I've seen the movies, but I've not played the games. And he's a gamer. He likes the games. So it helped both of us when we were talking about it 2 weeks ago to come from different perspective of it. Mm-hmm. I, even though not a Resident Evil game player, still enjoyed your documentary because it's the history of this little pocket of time in Romero's career that I didn't even know about.
And that was something that I actually got a little bit beat up about, because you have these people that don't want to sit through the history lessons. Like some people got bored about George Romero, or they're huge fans of the game, so of course they have to know everything about the video game. And they just felt like I was padding out the documentary. And it's like, well, you understand, like, I've personally talked to George Romero fans that know nothing about the video game. So I fought for this because, there were notes sent back and saying, like, you don't need these sections. And it's like, well, you kind of do, because there's Resident Evil fans that aren't even going to know who George is and why he's important. Exactly. And I really needed to set that base and show this is why, Resident Evil is a big deal. This is why George Romero was a big deal at the time. And, I wanted to weave it together and start showing you the, like connecting the dots, how one thing led to another.
Well, and you did that brilliantly, and because for full transparency, I thought that at first when we were going through the history of Romero and whatnot, I was like, this feels like padding because I know all this already. None of this is new. And I took a step back. I was like, wait. Not everybody out there is autistically obsessed with Romero like I am. This actually might be new to somebody. I should probably. And once I looked at it from that angle, from that point on, I was loving the history lesson because it didn't matter that I already knew it. I was seeing the way that you presented it, or the way that the people that were featured in the documentary, like Romero's protege was talking about the man, and like Night of the Living Dead is my favorite horror film of all time. So yeah, there might not be anything about that film I quote unquote don't know, but seeing the love for it's like, okay, stop looking at it as informational and start looking at it as appreciation. It might be informational for others. For me, it's George Romero appreciation, and it gave me a whole new look on that first 30 minutes or so of the documentary.
Oh, and just hearing the film history and his protege talk about being on set just brought back memories for me as someone who was the grunt, who was the one who had to make the fake blood and then throw it and all this stuff, and learn from people who learned from that era of special effects. So it just like brought tears to me while I was watching, because it made me remember the stuff that I enjoyed doing when I was on sets. So I don't know why people have criticism for this, because I feel you're hitting both audiences, both in the Resident Evil fans and the Romero fans, and you've mixed it very well throughout the documentary.
I
Every
mean,
time,
everyone's going to have their opinion of it, and
yeah,
if they purchased a copy of it or rented it, they have a right to disagree.
I
But
always say opinions are like buttholes; they stink sometimes. So.
what I think what really grounded it for me was I was feeling bad at times with some of the really nasty stuff, the really really nasty stuff that was being said, and then I was like, well, I want to see what are the 1-star reviews of George's films, and and it's like really nasty stuff, and I was like, I wonder what like a 1-star review of The Godfather looks like, and I would look at that, and I was like, man, even The Godfather has like a massive amount of 1-star reviews. I'm like, you know. Romero carried on, and not all these are like new reviews. Like some of this stuff goes back,
Mhm.
and even look at we talked about it in the documentary. Like look at the nasty review that Variety had on Night of the Living Dead, where they're caught saying that they made pornography of violence, and basically that they should be ashamed of themselves. And I'm thinking like George Romero survived all that criticism. And he lived long enough for the internet to see all the nasty stuff that people would say. Same thing with Francis Ford Coppola. He's still around. All the nasty 1-star reviews of The Godfather. They're still carrying on. He probably got a bunch of 1-star reviews for what was it called, Megalopolis or whatever,
Oh
that just
yeah,
came out
that's
last year. But at the
yeah.
end of the day, though, he made it. He made it, and I'm sure, he survived. So that kind of grounded me a little bit and said, if someone like George Romero or Coppola, George Lucas, I'm sure Spielberg has 1-star reviews. Someone out there hates ET. Someone out there hates Jurassic Park. I
Actually, I
guarantee it.
hate ET. I'm
You know
not
Leon.
what I
even
mean?
I hate
So,
I hate ET.
so if those guys, in their careers can live on with 1-star reviews, it's like I'm sure me as a nobody who this is my first project, and some of these guys have had 20 films under their belt or more. It's like I'm sure that like this is my first film. I can survive having some bad reviews. So that really put it into perspective. But honestly, what really did it was I had so many people privately contact me, emails, on Twitter, Facebook, text, whatever. Like people were just trying to get a hold of me, Discord, and I got so many really beautiful, heartfelt like love letters. People just really going into saying like I was crying at the end. You nailed my love for George, and this is what I could tell that you love George Romero, and I love Resident Evil, and this made me feel very proud to be a Resident Evil fan because you kind of encompassed, everything about the series that I love. And then same thing with George. People just kept saying you wrote one of the best tributes to George Romero with this documentary, like especially at the end. You really nailed how
I cried at
everyone
the end. I
feels.
ain't gonna fry. I ain't gonna front.
Yeah.
Yeah. When it was when
It
everybody
felt
else
like
is
a love
crying about the
letter.
passing of George,
I
a few man tears started streaking. So yeah, you did a good job
I
that too.
I still remember we had to put together a reel for the distributor. So we were like halfway done filming, and we had gotten enough of the interviews. We didn't even have like George Demick crying. We didn't have some of the additional stuff. But I asked Tom, the cinematographer, I said, hey, could you put together like 30 minutes? Like, here's some of the things I want, but I want to give you like a little bit of, free range, just put it together. You can show me your editing. and we got to show something to the distributor to kind of get them on board. So he sends it to me and he says, bring tissues. And I was like, oh, okay. I was like, I'm a hard man to cry, bud. And he showed me this. It was like a 30-minute version of the documentary. It had a little bit about George, a little bit about the game, and then it didn't really have much about the movie because we hadn't gotten there yet with interviewing Ben Rubin and stuff. But then it went into some of the material we had with like Matt Blasey and then Jim Crud talking about his death and the music that was playing is like, next thing I know, I'm crying. And I was like, I'm not crying, you're crying. So I sent it to George Demick. And I said, here's what we got going on. And, I had already known him for, I don't know, like a year, 2 years at that point, something like that. We're on that basis by that point where we call each other for holidays and stuff.
Just George was the one that once he started crying, I fucking lost it. Every appearance he has in your documentary, by the way, is so genuine and heartfelt. He is the standout of everybody that you interview.
Well, he watched it, and then I get a phone call with him. So I answer it, and the first thing I hear is, you son of a bitch. And I was like, what's going on, George? And he's like, I sit down to watch this thing thinking that it's just about one of George's unmade movies. And by the end, I'm fucking bawling my eyes out. And it's like this long pause, and he's like, I'm just fucking with you. He's like, I did cry, but I just want to tell you, you did an amazing job. And then it was, I want to say like 2 months later, we finally sat down and interviewed him. And I mean, no one in that room had a drive. Everyone was crying. Everyone in the room. And that's really hard because we have all this audio recording. Everyone's trying to like not
hold
fucking
yeah.
They were like, oh my God, like we have to like shut the fuck up and let this guy like, talk. And he's crying and we're crying. And, it was a very rough interview because, here's someone that is a close friend and I'm having to ask him questions that are obviously upsetting him, but he understood like this was his chance to like really pour his heart out and talk about the things that he's wanted to talk about and, to put it in front of, all these people that may not have known who George Romero really was as a person. So yeah, there was a lot of emotion behind everything that we did. This was made with the best intentions.
I do want to ask, were you ever able to meet Romero before his passing?
I had an opportunity to. I forget when exactly it was. It was like sometime in 2016, I think. And something came up last minute, and I was like, well, there's next time. It's okay. I can see him next time. And then he got sick. And then, one day I saw on social media that he had passed away, and, that fucking hit me. And, I had the biggest amount of regret, that I'd never got to meet him because I wanted to thank him. By that point I hadn't made anything, but I was like, I've been inspired by you. Like, he is my inspiration for wanting to make movies. And getting to know the people that were close to him and how they revere him. They idolize him. They talk about just how much of a great, upstanding guy he was. And I wanted to have those same qualities. Like, I wanted to, treat my cast and crew the way that he did, and, kind of put people before films. So I've gotten to know George very intimately through his friends, getting to hear like those private stories that they don't exactly, talk about in documentaries, and, really getting to know who he was, and getting to hear a lot of really funny stories. And there was one that there was actually two really funny stories that we actually did cut out of the documentary. I'm hoping to restore them down the road with an extended cut. Because we shot
For you
about,
gamers out there, that's similar to DLC. Sorry, go
on. Because unfortunately, like the lawyers had us rework about 40% of the documentary. So there's like stuff
really? Is
cut
there a
out.
reason
Yep.
for that?
It's just legalities. There's some stuff that we couldn't get some legal clearances for, or there's actually some stuff that people had some really juicy information, but the lawyers were like, listen, you got to have like 2 sources to back that up. If you don't have those sources, you can't use it. The lawyers were the same team that clears South Park.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's how we could get this released. Like, we're legally sound. So when they say cut something, you cut it. There is no fighting them. So but there is some stuff that we had to cut out and like rework, and there's some stuff I wasn't happy with in the documentary personally. And
I wasn't happy that those you were interviewing, things that they said that you weren't happy they'd said, or
well, there's like I would say like this version works for the general audience. That's like, hey, I just want to get some information. The version that I will eventually do, I jokingly call it the vanity cut, because it's just me sitting down, putting in the shit that I want to put in. But I had a lot more to talk about with George, because I really wanted to not only show more about who George Romero was as a person, but also some of the stories like really told you more about who these people were. George Demick and George Romero were both very, very close. George Romero used his name to talk to Stephen King to get the rights for Graveyard Shift, to let George Demick meet Stephen King so he could get the rights to Graveyard Shift. Stephen King left, this 21-year-old kid meet him based on the word of George Romero.
Wow.
That's so goddamn
Like
amazing.
I just got chills. Just
yeah, no kidding. That's
wow.
like that's a good.
Imagine being that age and
that's a good story.
Yeah,
and the other thing I was kind of disappointed with, and I'll spoil things for what I want to put in it, but there's a very random piece that's at the beginning where George Demick says, back then, George was George, no security. He came through the front door. He's talking about when he met George in the 70s. We originally had a counterbalance to that, where Demick talks about he went to a showing, a premiere of Diary of the Dead, and George Romero was going to be there. And he goes, he's waiting in the audience, and he's waiting for George to come in, and he's looking at the front door, and here George comes in through the back, and he has his manager, and he has security, and George realizes, like, wow, things have really changed, that he can't just come through the front door anymore. So he goes and talks. He's friends with the owner of the theater, and says, listen, you know me. I've been friends with Romero for decades. I need to see him. And, he says, well, I don't think his manager is going to let you, and the security ain't going to let you by. Like, I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do. So what Demick did was he waited until everything was over and George was going to leave. And George, Demick is a huge guy. So is Romero. They're both like incredibly tall people. So Demick works his way up to the front of the crowd and yells out to Romero as he passes. And he said that Romero hadn't seen him for some time because Demick had left. This whole event was in like Tennessee or something. And, so probably more than a decade, maybe 15, maybe 20 years But Romero turned around and saw him, and Demick said, "Hey, it's me. It's George Demick." And he's like, "George?" And he just immediately grabbed him, put him into a huge bear hug, and then just said, "Come with me." And he brought him into the back. And he said they sat down and they had this long talk. They were hanging out, catching up. And, Demick had mentioned that, when George was sitting there talking to him, he said, I hear you're making movies now. And Demick said that, his eyes were lighting up, like he was really proud of Demick for what he was doing. And he's like, saying about how it was like the greatest moment of his life, being able to sit there and come full circle where he's like, George Romero is proud of me. So you can understand between those two stories why Demick is just bawling his fucking eyes out.
Yeah, has the response at the end of that film, because God, again,
I love Demick.
Not that there was anyone bad in the film or whatnot, but Demick was absolutely the standout guest that you guys had interviewing. And it's, while doing it wrong, like he talks about George and stuff in the documentary. That little story there, even just hearing it from you as opposed to in the documentary from him, added just that much more. Like, damn, that was.
You can, speaking as like someone as a director, like I really love the moment when George is talking about that, because when he says about how, Romero was so proud of him, you could see, that the tears in his eyes of, just reliving that moment. And, it's like tears of joy. And I just love the way that it was filmed. And, again, Tom Robinholt, great cinematographer. He actually came on board like right before we started filming. I did like an event down at in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, Creature Feature Weekend. Fucking love that show. We ended up doing like an announcement there. We had like some test footage that was shot, just like cobbled together like this little teaser trailer. It was like 50 seconds long, and just kind of talking to people about, hey, we're gonna make this documentary. And he was there to show off like his short film, and he contacted me a little while later, and he confided in me and said, as someone who has studied George's films, I went to Pittsburgh to study film. I have a degree. I'm a huge admirer of George Romero. I love the Resident Evil games. He's like, I'm not going to lie, seeing all of you up there on the stage, there was part of me that was jealous, and I felt like I should be there on stage with you. So I got to watch a short film, and I think it cost less than $1,000, and he pulled off this like really beautiful, very late 70s, early 80s looking horror film. But it had all style, really good story, really good acting, special effects. I'm like, okay, dude, you're hired, And I even fucked with him a little bit, because when we interviewed him, we only asked him generic questions, and he knew like I had some other projects going on, and we led him to believe that we were hiring him to shoot a completely different film. So we're sitting there, the producer and I are talking to him, and just asking him questions for an hour. Like, what are your skills? What equipment do you have? What are you going to do if this happens? What are you going to do if that happens? Just making sure like he's competent. And he completely impressed us. So, Matt and I both agreed, like, yeah, this is the guy. So we got back to him and we're like, hey, we just wanted to let you know you're officially hired as cinematographer on, and like we left a little bit of a pause, and we're like, George A. Romero's Resident Evil. And he was like completely blown away. Like there was actually some shock in there. And he's like, what? It's like, yeah, like you're going to shoot the documentary with me. So me and him got along. In fact, the first time we met in person was on set filming the documentary. And I think by the end of the day, it was like we had been working together for 10 years. Like we were just
That's good chemistry.
Yeah.
That's good chemistry.
So like we've both already agreed, like there's nothing that, like we both have very similar very similar styles, very similar like business practices and like the styles of film we want to do. So for the, we don't see a reason to ever part. So we're like very much intertwined. Our destinies are intertwined together to try and make things work. So
Very
but,
cool.
do you have a question? I'm sorry, go on.
But we're about halfway through the show. I know the chat has been submitting questions. You guys have been awesome. I'm sorry I haven't been bringing you up. I do want to address just the few super stickers and stuff. Just give us a break for a minute. So Jake for $5, a super sticker. I don't have YouTube open, so I don't know what that is on that site, but thank you so much for that. And for that, I have a new clip for you. Spanish or German, Leon?
Well, real quick, the clip is a cat with a paintbrush saying number 1.
Cool.
So Spanish or German? I'm gonna vote Spanish. Let's go with Spanish.
Okay.
Que hables, maldito, de lo contrario te arrojaré al fuego.
A la verga me vale verga, perro. Y cállate a la verga, hija de su puta madre.
So it's Child's Play in Spanish. Big Ship for another $5 super sticker. Thank you so much.
That is what looks like a hippopotamus running as fast as he can, so his feet look like wheels.
Okay, and then for you, my friend.
This is the skin of a killer, Bill.
And last but not least, Doc Kaiju Labs for $3 super sticker. Thank you, sir, so much.
This is a squirrel or chipmunk saying "my hero."
Cool.
Finger licking good.
All right. That's one of my favorite movies. All right. Question for you, sir. I've got quite a few that have lined up. Where is this? Let me scroll this up. Why won't this disappear? Give me one. I think this is with the renaissance occurring in horror genre as of lately, with franchises and films such as like Substance, Edgar's Nosferatu remake. Is there a project in mind that's like your dream project that you would love to tackle? Like no unlimited budget, no studio interference. Is there a type of monster or story you would like to tell?
Well, I can talk about some of the projects I am doing toward the end of the show because I do have a video game adaptation that's in the works that I have the rights to.
All right.
But dream project, no concerns about budget. I think it would be a split. And I mean, obviously Resident Evil, but I feel like there's so many Resident Evil films. I feel like the damage is done now. I don't think there's anything you could do.
Speaking my language again, buddy.
That would impress anyone at this point. But I would probably want to try and do a 2-part adaptation of Parasite Eve.
Oh, son. Okay.
Or I have always wanted to do a adaptation of War of the Worlds that is horror, because every adaptation has done it from the point of view of a war movie where it's lots of guns firing and they really want to show the devastation. But I think one of the I always love the quote that's in the original novel where it basically is summarizing the idea of we as human beings will go into other places and commit atrocities and conquer one another. And it's like, what happens when something outside this world treats us the exact same way that we not only treat each other, but we drive native species extinct? When you look at stuff like the Tasmanian tiger and all the animals that have just been driven to extinction as humanity has migrated around the planet. So I was like, I kind of like that. Like, what would happen if this alien species comes to Earth and it's like, we're a food source. And you think about like some of the worst possible things that could be done to an animal. And it's like, what happens when something that has a different set of morals and values is just like, oh, what's this thing? Let's peel its skin off, and eat it. You know, like something to me just thinks like that's really fucking creepy if you're looking at it from the point of view of almost like a George Romero film. You know, this idea of it's the
And it
apocalypse.
harkens back. Oh, I'm sorry.
It's the apocalypse. People can't get along to solve the issue, and then on top of that, you have we're like ants to these things that are just going in, and the novel is um, way more graphic in its display of violence. It's very effective for a novel from the 19th century that's talking about, you know, basically like biological gas attacks or chemical weapons, I should say, chemical weapon use and just extreme devastation where you're just being wiped out or used for food. So I was like, that would be kind of neat to do is they're terraforming the planet, trying to take over and exterminate us. So I would like to see something like that. I have a
Doing
lot.
War of the Worlds as a horror film also would harken back to the original like Orson Welles broadcast. That
Mhm.
I mean, which is there's a tie in there that's brilliant as well. So that's a great answer.
Yeah, I
Are
have a
you?
lot. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Are you a comic book fan by chance as well, or just
Here's where it gets
curious?
weird. I am not a really big superhero fan. I have some
Oh,
of the more
I'm talking about more the indie stuff. So I don't read like the mainstream superhero stuff. I read more the horror stuff. So what you're describing to me is similar to like I don't know if you've ever crossed the
I've
kind of
heard it.
more zombie like
Mhm.
stuff. So is there one comes to mind that you enjoy?
Um, let's see. Do I have it nearby? No, I don't think I do. That's a shame. Um, so the one comic book that not horror,
Okay.
and this really shows my age. I would love to do an adaptation of Cadillacs and Dinosaurs, which also goes by the name Xenozoic Tales. Indie
Interesting.
comic, originally published by Kitchen Sink Press. I always describe it for like video game fans is imagine Fallout, but instead of like the mutants and all that stuff, just put in dinosaurs. It's the same thing.
That's dope.
People
As a
people
Fallout
go
fan, I'm down.
people go into vaults and then like hundreds of years later they come out and the earth has been terraformed into like basically prehistoric times and every type of animal that has ever existed is now in this world. You have these different factions that are trying to like get power. There's a lot of politics. There's this group of people called mechanics. They're engineers that recover old tech. And the main guy, his name's Jack Tenrick. He has a Cadillac that he drives around, and he's like an Indiana Jones type guy. And these mechanics, they're like rangers, like they like game wardens. They preserve nature, and they kind of try and keep the balance between too much technology and preserving the natural order. And it just gets into all this wild stuff. It's really fucking good, and it's violent. Dinosaurs are ripping people apart, and there's like shooting dinosaurs. They're going on all these crazy adventures. It's very pulp. So it's
I'm
like
gonna have to check it out.
I highly recommend it.
Okay.
It goes by Xenozoic Tales or Cadillacs and Dinosaurs. I have the
Totally.
original 3 trade paperbacks, but yeah, there's always been rumors that the creator, Mark Schultz, which he's done like other stuff. He actually did Prince Valiant for a while back in the 2000s. But he's always talked about wanting to try and do one more volume to conclude it because there was never an ending. What happened was Kitchen Sink Press, I guess, went out of business, and then he just never got a chance to do anything more with it. But he was allegedly writing a graphic novel that would end the series. So very, very
Did
cool.
they
It's
make
from
it
my
into
show.
an animation as well at some point.
They did a kids cartoon back after Jurassic Park. They had a
That's what's coming
13
up.
episode kids cartoon. They had video games, a tabletop RPG, action figures. Like it was for like 6 months. Cadillacs and Dinosaurs was like this kind of like really cool thing that happened, but it never really launched. You know, it had too much up against it. But I love the cartoon series. It's you know, obviously it's a little bit more for kids, but it captures a lot of the same ideas. You just gotta get over like some of the stuff where you're like, okay, they probably have a toy of that. You know, like there's certain things in it, but otherwise, like there's some really interesting like little stories in that. It's it deals with some pretty cool themes of, you know, like, hey, our ancestors destroyed the world doing something. Should we really be trying to uncover this new technology that we know nothing about? And, you know, maybe we should just start over and just not worry about trying to find computers and other shit. So there's some really cool ideas in it, and really good debates between the characters, and like, you know, I highly recommend it. Even like I said, even the cartoon is good.
Yeah, I can see it. The cartoon's coming up. It's on Tubi. The game is coming up too, but I'm looking for the comic as well. I'm a big comic nerd. Again, more the indie stuff, not so much. I mean, I have a couple like DC Marvel stuff, but
they actually did. I don't think Mark was involved in it, but Topps Comics actually had other like spin-off series that were off of Cadillacs and Dinosaurs. So you can also find like several mini series that deal with like different stories. And I have quite a few issues of those too. They're all really good. I don't think I've seen anything bad that's come out of the comics line for Cadillacs and Dinosaurs.
very yep. I just added it to my box to check it out.
Please let me know what you think.
I will. I'm always looking for new comics and new stuff to read. I like pulpy kind of stuff too. So it's right up my alley.
There was another one that was really good because I mostly read Dark Horse comics, and I was really big into Dark Horse Presents, which is where they let like all these creators just do whatever, and you would get like little pieces of comics. And there was one that was called Race of Scorpions, and it had like this sword and sword. Yeah, it's called Race. It has like this weird post-apocalyptic sword and sorcery, like Dune type feel to it. And
yeah,
like,
the cover does look like Dune.
And it was really cool. I have a few issues of that. And I was like, man, that would make for a really cool movie, you know, just because it's like the sword and sorcery version of Dune. Like less spaceships and rifles and more like Conan the Barbarian in a desert planet, you know.
That sounds awesome.
Well, with going into the research with on Romero and stuff, what do you think nowadays of how people call it elevated horror, right? You went from researching, you know, a man that started a lot of these people's careers that are horror directors at this point, right? Influenced a lot of these. But well, what do you think of the term elevated horror? I think it's a little, but what do you think of it?
I mean, I can accept it as a term for like a business point of view, because that's how that's how studio execs are going to take it. They're going to want to hear buzzwords like that. But me personally, I don't find something like Hereditary any different than, say, The Exorcist.
Yes.
Or The Omen. You know, there's a lot of similarities there. It's just that filming styles have changed. You know, there's still plenty of horror films from decades ago that were like very heady and mental, you know, just as much as, you know, people talk about like the Terrifier movies being these like really over the top gory films. And it's like, let me introduce you to something called Cannibal Holocaust.
Yes.
Yeah. What's old is new. So I will say that there is a slightly different style to like the A24 type film. And I kind of run across all the different subgenres of horror. You know, I think the only thing that I don't really get much into is slashers, but that's more because I feel like there's only like three types of slashers, and the best ones I feel were 30, 40 years ago. And they kind of set it, and then everyone else just kind of copied off of it. And you still see it to this day where people are still trying to copy
Like
you know
Black
some,
Christmas.
Well,
yeah,
I was
like,
gonna say,
well,
did you see Hard Eyes yet?
you can look at like something like Texas Chainsaw Massacre
Yep.
setting a trend where there's a lot of Texas Chainsaw Massacre type slasher films. Halloween, obviously, it's kind of set the bar for horror films, and that led to Friday the 13th, which I still think the first few Friday the 13th films are really good. They're much better than I think what some people would lead you to believe. In fact, I really hated the remake of Friday the 13th because I felt
The
like
2008 one.
yeah, I really did not like it because it felt like they took it was almost like someone had only heard about a Friday the 13th movie or like remembered what they were like 20 years ago, and they went off of memory and just wrote it. And it was nothing but like sex, pot use, over the top kills. And it's like, there's some of those films actually had really good stories about them, and they kind of had a certain feel. It wasn't all like, like Part 6 was really good. Part 4 was really good. Not all of them dealt
Part
with
6
just
one with Corey Feldman. Was that 5?
4.
That's
Part
4. Okay.
Yeah.
Part 6 is when Jason actually comes back and he's undead Jason.
Oh, with the lightning
lightning
strikes. Yeah, that's right. Okay.
So I mean, like, and the original, like I said, is actually a very inventive horror film with like its twists and reveals that
He's not even in the original.
Yeah,
Until
actually, he is. He is.
Well,
At
yeah,
the end,
the
at the
final
end.
scene, yeah.
Yeah.
In the ending, but
Yeah.
but no, like and then you look at Nightmare on Elm Street. Nightmare on Elm Street was a very inventive horror film, and I still think it's probably one of the best that the slasher genre has to offer, just because of how the film works. Between the killer and the rules that are set, it's the most inventive one. But no, I think people sometimes get a little bit too wrapped up in labels of elevated horror versus I don't even know what other fucking trendy terms there are.
I look at horror as an umbrella.
You ever heard of coffee shop
and there's
horror?
like sub genres underneath
shop
this
horror?
umbrella.
Yeah, coffee shop horror. You've never heard of coffee shop horror?
No.
That's because I just made it up. Doesn't it sound like something would be a thing? Like, it doesn't sound like something they would say on the fucking internet nowadays. Sorry.
That feels like something that would be like light and fluffy that you can talk about in a coffee shop. Like it's not nothing vulgar,
Nothing crazy.
Unless you have another question, Nadia, do you mind if I ask? So
yeah, Leon, of course.
We've talked a lot about the documentary. We've talked a lot about Resident Evil. We've talked a lot about George A. Romero. But the actual marriage that makes this whole thing come together is really the unreleased, not even unreleased, never even really started film and script. And you've read the script. I read the script in like 2016, 2017, somewhere along there. And I mean, shit. You got it right. That's
this is
what
actually
are your thoughts?
This is actually one of the treatments.
Because there are multiple. There were like 4 or something.
Oh, there's quite a few, and then there's another. That's one of the scripts. So yeah,
I think you're making Leon very jealous right now.
Oh,
I have my material.
What do you think of the actual script itself, and B, what was it about this script that made you? Because I imagine part of what made you want to make this documentary was the script. So, what are your thoughts on the script, and what about the script made you want to base your documentary around it?
I'm actually a really big fan of the script, but it's because I read it at just the right time. I will say that if you're a fan and you don't know anything about this script until 2025 and you sit down and read it, chances are you're probably not going to like it, because there's 30 years of lore. There's Resident Evil kind of found what it wants to be since 1998. George's script has a lot of really neat ideas within it. And, for someone that didn't have all of the information, there's a lot of stuff in Japan that was never brought over to America until much later. Some of the backstory for the games and such wasn't translated. I really like the fact that he kind of added his own spin on it. And when you look at some of the other video game films that were coming out at the times, every one of them had changes to the lore. Even the Mortal Kombat film from 1995, which is still looked at fondly, it had lots of changes to the lore from the games.
Mario, Street Fighter, later on
Yeah.
Tomb Raider, all of them. And to be fair, a lot of those early ones, I love Street Fighter. I love the first Mortal Kombat. I like Tomb Raider. Despite being a massive Angelina Jolie hater, this script, in my opinion, it does have problems. I think that it does have some objective, what I would consider, issues. I think it still leaps and bounds better than what we got. What we ended up getting from W.S. Anderson.
One of the things I like about the script is the fact that out of all of the live action stuff that we've gotten, this is the only one that tonally I feel gets the games right.
I agree with that completely.
And for as much as some of the characters have been changed, the leads all feel like they're characters. Chris.
Do you even think that about Chris? Chris is the big bugaboo a lot of folks have, and I'm mixed on Chris.
Chris was originally written in George's script to actually have his full background of being a former Air Force pilot who was insubordinate because he went back to rescue other people. They had all that. Then there was probably some studio notes that they didn't want that. They probably just wanted him. Now, he was always a regular guy. They didn't have him as a member of Stars in anything. But it looked like they wanted, maybe the producers wanted it, where they just wanted to have a Native American character. They wanted,
and that's a big not only him being a Native American, but also him being a rancher. Like, and part of me tries to justify it as he's the audience surrogate, and maybe that's what they're going for.
I mean, it's there, but when you look at it, George is still trying to make it work. And first off, you got to realize that George's first drafts are way rougher than other writers, and he's just not about like trying to make everything as pristine as possible, because at the end of the day, the script is just this document. The finished film is what represents him. So some of this stuff you have to look at, like, you can't really knock him for the dialogue. One, the game's dialogue.
Well, the first game didn't exactly have great fucking dialogue.
But the other thing too is he'll change dialogue on the fly, and he's and I believe even some of the actors have been allowed to improvise stuff. So that would have been fixed eventually. And there's plenty of stuff in the original Dawn of the Dead that is kind of cheesy itself, but the actors are so fucking good at what they do that they just deliver it. Yep. Like some of the stuff that like Ken Foray says is like if anyone else had probably said some of that stuff, it would have been incredibly cheesy, but Ken just fucking nails it because he's such a great actor. But when it comes to like Chris Redfield, like, he's very insubordinate, and he plays that role opposite Wesker. And I'm like, man, that's Chris. He's not following orders. He's not doing what he's told. Wesker is almost exactly like the way he is in the original game. So is Jill. Yeah, they nail like the personalities of what you would want those characters to be. Wesker is absolutely exactly the type of character he was in the original 1996 game. He wasn't this megalomaniac who wants to inject viruses in him and conquer the world. In the original 1996 game, he was just a dude out to steal the research and make money. Yeah, and he nailed it. But George does it in his own way, and he still betrays people, but he comes off as much more like you think he actually cares about his team. And they use like the relationship between him and Barry, where he's manipulating Barry to do things that he wants, and then in the end it kind of costs Barry his life. And to some extent, I still feel like maybe because it'll never be confirmed, that when George was writing this, it almost feels like Barry and Wesker are sort of like this this updated version of Peter and Roger from Dawn of the Dead. You know, it has very much that same feeling. And to me, I felt like George may, like, in my head canon, I was thinking like, wow, I wonder if George was doing that because he knew, like, if his fans watch this, they're gonna think that it's just Peter and Roger all over again, not realizing the tragedy that's gonna happen at the end when, you know, Wesker blows Barry away. And I was like, man, that just really makes it hurt even more when you start like going through the layers and realizing like, oh, there might be a little bit deeper thinking about this. You know, there might be a little bit more going on. I like the fact that he has a lot of the monsters in it, that he actually tried to work in as much as he could.
Tried to work in the Hunters, if I remember right. I haven't read this since like 2017 or so. But he tried to work in the Hunters, if I recall. Several of them.
And here's someone who's trying to make things feel very grounded. You know, this is someone who's taking the video game and trying to make it work as a grounded horror film. So the Hunters, they're still the Hunters, but I guess he wanted to explain why they take way more rounds to put down and why you can't easily kill them. So he has it that they have steel plating grafted underneath their skin. Like they actually went in, cut them open, and put armor plating underneath, including their faces. And like the claws are kind of more engineered where they're grafted on. Same thing with the Tyrant. It's like stuff that's been grafted
in your
on.
documentary, they show the model of the Tyrant, and it looks so fantastic.
We spent like 20 minutes on it just on when we were talking about it.
I really wish I had it nearby. I own that.
Really, the one that's showcased in your documentary, because
that was made by John Wrightson, who's the son of Bernie Wrightson, and he did it as tribute to his father. So I have that maquette here at the house. So it's.
I hope you have it in a glass box protected.
I do not have it in a glass box, but I do try and take care of it. So it's like I've the documentary has allowed me to see some really cool shit. You know, acquire some really cool shit. And as a fan, it's like I'm going to protect this stuff. I love this stuff so much. It's trying to think here. What else about the script? Oh, so here's some other good juicy stuff regarding the script. So Barry Burton being African American, that is probably, I can't confirm, so we'll say allegedly.
Okay.
It's probably a studio note because Barry Burton was African American in McElroy's draft, the writer before George.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that for people that are ripping George about for making Barry black, Barry was originally supposed to be black in Resident Evil 1. It was a last minute change for one reason or another. And that, there were different characters in the game as development went on. But
I have a theory as to why. I'm curious if you do.
Well,
as to why it changed.
I mean, I know a lot of the background. I just don't want to give certain.
Okay.
Gotcha.
I don't want to like give certain like drama or, bring up some stuff that may not want to be known. But I do know that when they first scrapped a couple of the characters and were changing things around, when they came up with Barry Burton, he was actually apparently based upon Danny Glover from Lethal Weapon. And then at some point they just shifted him to being Caucasian. So, but
being a ginger, that's still a minority. I mean,
it's but there's some really neat things with that, and there seemed to be that George access to some of the behind the scenes stuff because Marcus is in it. And Marcus was just created around the time that George was writing his script. I believe some of the concept art was only like the month before he started writing. So the Marcus in George's script is the same Marcus that's in Resident Evil 0 because that game was originally
really interesting. I did not know that. That's
awesome.
Awesome.
They started work on 0 back in 1998. It was originally for the Nintendo 64. And there's some slight differences from the 64 version to what ended up in the GameCube
Which,
version.
by the way, might be the most underrated Resident Evil game. 0 is fantastic.
And just in the treatment, so George's script would be the first appearance of James Marcus. It's also, as far as I'm aware, the first appearance of where they talk about the virus originating from Africa.
Really?
Which we wouldn't even get until 5, which is
that's in here.
Crazy.
So
he was doing his research. You know,
did they give him stuff to go off of, or
they
were
giving
stuff from his script?
I don't think that George. I think it would be unfair to say that George probably inspired Capcom. I think they already knew they wanted the virus to originate from Africa because that was actually around. That was around not too long afterwards because I think it was like 2000, 2001. They had Wesker's report. And
Wesker's report was in 2001. Yep.
And I'm pretty sure one of them starts talking about how, you know, they were pulling stuff from like the Ebola virus and stuff like that.
Okay.
So,
because you said it'd be unfair to say that George inspired Capcom. I mean, to be fair, because Resident Evil Shinji Mikami has gone records to say that Don is dead. And I mean, really George did. I knew what you meant. I was being pedantic, but like, we wouldn't have Resident Evil.
I don't want anyone to think that Capcom just started like ripping off George's script because you know I don't think Capcom really even saw this script. You know, they didn't have a lot of hands-on like they did with the Street Fighter film because the Street Fighter film cost Capcom a lot of money. You know, one of the things that we couldn't show in the documentary because we needed to get the additional sources was that Alex Danielle actually was talking about how Capcom is near bankruptcy. Like, they just had one disaster after another.
Resident Evil was initially going to be their last game. That's why it has like 5 endings. It was their like you're never going to get a sequel, and it's the game that saved them.
Resident Evil was almost canceled after it was created. They had a finished game. They went to like a Boston consulting firm, and were instructed that to market and release the game would be too much, and they're like it wasn't going to sell well, and they should just scrap the game. Don't release it. It would be cheaper just to shelve it and pretend it didn't exist. And thankfully, they didn't listen. They released it, and it ended up saving the company. But there was like a moment where the game wasn't going to come out. Like it almost didn't come out if Capcom
I knew it saved. I didn't know it wasn't ever going to come out. I knew they were going to bankruptcy, and that it's the game that saved them. And again, they get sequels, but I didn't know about the canceling part. That's again teaching me shit. I love it. Thank you.
Technically, the 3 of us wouldn't be here right now had the game been canceled either. So there's a domino effect here.
So yeah, there's a lot about it that I really like. You know, he did work in certain puzzle elements. You have the key cards, which are in Resident Evil 2. In fact, Resident Evil 1.5 actually has a green key card. Blue and red are in Resident Evil 2, but the prototype also had a green key card that is also in George's script. The tiger statue is in George's script.
I do remember that, which I remember even in you know, again, 2016, 17, whenever I read it, it was like, holy shit, he's throwing in the puzzles. Like I had such a fanboy moment over specifically the tiger statue.
Yeah, there's a lot of really neat stuff that, you know, you can tell he was inspired by. Like, I'm pretty sure the tunnel that has like the laser trap with the steam, acidic steam, I'm pretty sure that's a combination of like it's obviously the power room from the labs, but then it's also there's the one room that has a poison gas trap, and that's
with
in
the
the
suits of
labs.
armor, if I recall. Yeah.
Yeah, so I feel like he was combining elements there because I think the power room has steam in it that's shooting out.
Mhm.
So I think he just combined it and said, that'd be kind of neat having steam that comes out and burns their flesh away. That sounds like something that would help make sure monsters can't get past a certain point. The one thing that I thought was really neat, that the only thing I can think of is maybe it was inspired by the underground, how they had like the turning room,
The rotating rock wall of
but they had that room where it like turns and it like becomes like a combine, and it just sort of like shreds anything that's in there and chews it up. I was like, well, that's fucking neat. That's like, I want to see that, like a whole room that's just like chewing up all these monsters and dead bodies.
Well, there was one change in the script that I actually think it works better than the games, which is so rare when you do video game adaptations. Is the games obviously is an interactive experience, and you want to feel alone, isolated. So like whether you're Chris or Jill, you very rarely see other characters. Occasionally you run into Becca or Barry or whatnot, but however, because this is a horror film, in Romero's script, all the stars are there from the get-go, or most of them are, and they they're getting picked off one by one, because you need those deaths throughout a film to drive up the anxiety and whatnot. And like the way he was able to portray stars as a team, and as like that's so cool, because you don't really get that in the games. You're alone pretty much from the get-go. Most people are already dead or die off screen or whatnot, and so I love that part of George's treatment.
That was something that I also really liked, and it kind of made sense too, because one of my criticisms of the original games is when I got into Resident Evil 2, the commercial had Chief Irons. It's still my favorite line from any of the games, is Chief Irons screaming, "Everyone's gonna die." I ended up putting it into my trailer for the documentary because I love that line so much. But I was disappointed with how much everyone doesn't die. And all the games are like that. Like there's like a lot of deaths happen off screen. Especially when you look at the first game, like almost everyone from Bravo team dies off screen. And
I think Enrico is the only one that dies on screen, if I recall. I mean, I guess Rebecca can die on screen if you fuck up.
There's Richard.
Oh yeah, I forgot about Richard. Richard dies.
But you don't see him get attacked, and it is very anticlimactic because you don't get to see these really cool deaths. And it was kind of neat that Romero was like, no, we're gonna see stuff happen. We're gonna see the shit. In fact, his treatment is even more brutal because he has like
I was going to ask you about that, because one of the things you say in the documentary was that it's theorized that one of the reasons it got scrapped was because it was too brutal, and that's just a theory. Is that a theory you subscribe to?
No, well, yeah. I mean that's absolutely what happened was, and I think there might have been a little bit more to it. It wasn't just the fact that it was gory. It was the fact that George was pushing for it to be gory. And I personally think, and allegedly, that Constantine wasn't really sold on George. Because again, he hadn't made a film in how many years. And, his way of making movies was pretty old school. And he wants to make this like really graphic video game movie. And I think Constantine themselves were like, we want to see something a little bit more mainstream. We want to be able to, we want this to be a wide release. And I think they kind of got cold feet, because when you look at the script, it's like, holy shit, the majority of this movie is just people getting ripped apart. It's very expensive, and I think they realized, like, I think George was giving a lot of pushback and not delivering what they wanted, because his original treatment doesn't have Chris and Jill having sex. But then when you look,
it does have them getting in bed together, if I recall.
It has them have sex in the script, but it cuts it very short. It's like they go to script, but none of that exists in the treatment. And it's like, okay, so that must have been a studio note, because there was sexual stuff in the prior writer's script, and then you had Alice nude in Anderson.
Every
Yeah.
movie. Like there's not a movie
none
where
of
she does
this-
not get fucking naked.
None of this is reflected really in the games with this added like having the two hook up and then
No, they have
being in-
they have a platonic relationship in the games.
okay.
Like in
Fans
fact,
have wanted
there's
Chris and
not
Joe
really
to- yeah.
there's not really a lot of romance in the video games. You have like Leon and
Ada
with
got
this
sexual
weird-
tension, and that's
Yeah.
about the extent of it.
Well, even from somebody who's like passive, who have seen the movies and such, to me, Resident Evil has always been a horror game. But to
Mhm.
me, the movies that have been released, and I didn't see the last one,
not
more of
missing
an
anything.
action movies, not so much horror at it, maybe sci-fi action. If you really want to get
first one done by Paul W.S. Anderson is the closest in tone, I would argue, and even then, it's more of a good zombie film than it is a good Resident Evil film. It feels more like a side story of
But
Resident Evil. It still is not as good as Romero's script, in my opinion.
I feel like it doesn't have the heaviness of the games, the darkness and the horror of the games throughout the movie series.
My complaints with the first movie is that it's too clean and it's too it feels like a MTV music video.
Yeah, I was about to say
it's lacking it's
teen
lacking the same kind of music that you would find in the games. It's lacking any sort of like investigation.
It's lacking the grindhouse feel.
Together. Yeah, like Resident Evil is a lot of American horror tropes and classic horror archetypes, including, you know, like you have stuff from like Cronenberg's The Fly, Alligator, obviously Dawn of the Dead, like all these different horror movies rammed in with like Italian horror cinema, especially films like Zombie 2 and what's some of the other ones? Sorry, I'm drawing blanks here. But there's a lot, but yeah, there's a lot of like a lot of Italian horror cinema that feels merged in with the original games, and it's sort of like American cinematic culture, like the kind of culture you see about America that's only exists in movies, and all that is rammed together through the eyes of a Japanese creative team and how they view all this material. So to try and do any sort of adaptation of the video games, especially the original games, you have to keep all that in mind. I think as soon as you go in there and it's like, we're just going to have zombies and we're going to have machine guns blowing the piss out of everything, you know.
I'm sorry.
And Marilyn Manson's going to do the music score. You know, it starts like, it's like, okay, what are we doing here? You know, this isn't tonally, it's not the game.
Well, and I mean, even to the point, going back to like the tone of the game and like how Americana it is, they go out of the way. Raccoon City is a city in the Midwest. It's from the Arklay Mountains, very much Midwest Ozarks type area. Which, I mean, what's more representative of Americana than the Heartland, the Midwest? Like Resident Evil is a that's something else. The Paul W.S. Anderson films fucked up, by the way. They put Raccoon City in like Pennsylvania, if I recall, or something like that. No,
it's like Chicago area, I think.
Oh, yeah. Okay, maybe it is. Okay, I could be wrong on that then, but like it's supposed to be indicative of. I mean, this is a city in the Midwest surrounded by forest land. There's farm. It's not your LA is your New York's or whatnot. It is. I mean, it's got to be remote enough to where it's a big city, but you can also drop a nuke there and right from the face of the earth, you know, and be able to cover it up. It's
like Indianapolis or something like that. Yeah. Did you lose your train of thought? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, you're fine. I had a question. I was trying to I remember what it was, and it's blanking on me. It was okay. So it was about the Resident Evil 2 commercial. So you spent a lot of time in the documentary talking about the Resident Evil 2 commercial that George A. Romero was, you know, that was attached to, which was a Japanese commercial, mind you. When did you first see that commercial? Because I remember when I saw it back on fucking dial-up and didn't even know there was an extended cut. Your documentary taught me there was an extended cut. That's one of the things I did learn. So when did you first see it?
I saw the commercial back in like 1998. So it was still in those early days, and like you had to, like, I seen the photos that were coming out, and then eventually someone uploaded it where you could download it, and, you know, it took dial up.
Yeah, that's how it was like 2001 or something by the time I saw it. I remember like a 3 or 5 hour here's a few seconds. No, wait. Here's a few more seconds. And it took hours. My dad couldn't use the phone line at the time.
Oh yeah,
I
used to watch that thing all the time just because
but this was like the 2-minute cut or something. And in the documentary, you say there's like a 10 or 15-minute cut, which if it exists, I need to see.
And there's something out there. I don't know what exactly it is because they never really. I don't know if it's just longer versions of shots because there are 2 different commercials that were released that are like. There's like a 15-second one that's like a lot of really fast-paced cuts of different stuff. Zombies, Claire screaming and walking down the halls, like a lot more of Claire. And then there's the 30-second commercial that everyone has seen.
Maybe 30 seconds and not 2 minutes.
But Mike McGee, who had worked on the special effects with Screaming Matt George on the commercial, had said that he had actually seen like a 20 or 30-minute version of that footage. So I don't know. I don't think there was a lot of like additional scenes like Leon and Claire fight a tyrant or something. I think it's just a lot of footage, a lot of longer takes, and a lot of the other stuff that they filmed. Because there's even stuff in the American commercial that utilizes some of the materials from the Japanese commercial. Like it's the same zombie that's in an alleyway, and it's like coming up and attacking the camera basically. So I don't know if that was part of the filming when they did that in 1997 or what, but no, I don't know if we're ever going to find that. We're unfortunately going back to stuff that was from 1997, and the material is locked away.
Yeah,
I actually tried to get access to the material. It's in Japan. Capcom doesn't own it. The production company, the people, the media company that did all the packaging for the commercial, they apparently have it in a vault somewhere, and it's going
because it's not digital. It's back then. Yeah.
They basically they were going to work with me to try and get me access to it, but they wanted to do clearances and all this other shit, and I was basically told to send them a blank check and they'll fill it out. And that kind of collapsed the whole talks. It's like, yeah, that's not how this works. And then when I told them that I don't need clearances because I'll just blur out people's faces that aren't like public names, that I think that might have pissed them off, and they stopped talking to me because they realized.
They wanted a payday. But speaking of your filming experience, going from George Romero to you, one of the greatest things about this documentary as a fan was the opening and the outro. How it was very emblematic of the original PlayStation 1, the live action cutscenes from the original game. Where did that idea come from? Is there a certain story you were trying to tell with the way that you did those intros and outros and the occasional middle shots, like going upstairs and stuff? Like, where's
there was, I didn't want to just do like a traditional documentary where we'd show like a still image, like we would just like show a still image of something. Like everything that you see in the movie is all real. Like if we show a photo of George, it was something that was a physical item on set. In fact, that there and that there, those are actually collages of what survived filming. So, and then I actually gave a few people that worked on the film, I made them a collage. Like, here's some of the pieces of news articles, photos that we printed out, artwork, and would like give them as like a token gift to say like, hey, this way you can always remember working on this film. But everything existed on set, and I wanted to have that analog feel to like all the news articles, obviously the VHS tapes and the CRT television. Like I wanted that feel, and I wanted to bring in aspects of the video game. I wanted you to feel what made, kind of what it would feel like for George Romero to have made a movie. And we have no CGI in this. Like the opening shot, that's just us.
That's an extra star for me.
that's Pennsylvania. That's the Pennsylvania mountains. And then we have our soldier with sunglasses. walking, going through the mansion, reading documents and stuff. And then, of course, the documentary is narrated by Pablo Kuntz, who was the voice of Albert Wesker in the original video game. Which, funny enough, I saw like a bunch of people trying to claim that I use like AI voice acting, and it's like, no, that's a real guy. Like, he exists. He's from the original game.
And his talents as a voice actor have come a long way since 1996.
Well, he had actually talked to me about that.
Really?
Yep. And it was a lot. It's kind of very similar to what Alex Danielle was talking about with they wanted the English voice acting to ground it in reality because it's American characters, but the way the lines were delivered were meant for any Japanese person to understand, because they teach English in Japan. Some Japanese know more English than others, but so they wanted it to be delivered in a certain way that even those that may not have a large vocabulary of English would understand what is being said. And that's why it was delivered in such a way that just sounds really fucking awkward to anyone that speaks English. But it wasn't done. It wasn't done because they're terrible voice actors. It was done to keep in mind for a Japanese audience who were going to also play this game.
Yeah,
that's really cool. I mean, like I said, the objectively bad by English standard voice acting is, to me, it's part of the game's charm. I adore it. It's I think it's the chief reason to go back and play the original game, since honestly the 2002 remake does literally everything better. But when you hear lines like "Oh, master of unlocking," you're like, "Oh, it just hits a place in video games we're not at anymore." It harkens back to the time.
If you want to see one of the actors doing some pretty good or I shouldn't even say voice acting, just really good acting, Tom Robitaille and I, we actually went off and shot a horror film last fall. And Charlie Kraslovsky, who plays Chris Redfield in the original game, he's one of the main characters. And
that's cool.
You get to see like the complete opposite of Chris Redfield in this movie. He is like this like really sleazy...
Is this Resident Evil related, or is this...
No, it's an original horror film.
Have you seen the Resident Evil short film that came out on YouTube probably 6 or 7 months ago?
The Keeper's Diary?
The Keeper's Diary, yes, that Charlie is also in.
I worked on it.
No way, you worked on The Keeper's Diary?
Very minor, but
okay.
JJ brought me out because I did some work with them in the very, very early stages, where I basically talked about like legality stuff and like, hey, you probably should do things a little bit like this. And I was originally going to be a producer on The Keeper's Diary, but there was so much work that needed to be done on the documentary. It like really ramped up, and I needed to focus. I ended up having to bow out. So they wanted to reward me for the work that I did by flying me out to set. And JJ was going to interview me about the documentary because it was done. And the interview that released last summer, that was shot during The Keeper's Diary. That's why we're on The Keeper's Diary set.
That's so cool.
That's so cool.
So I was there for like 3 days, and everyone was trying to get everything done, and they were a little bit behind on shooting, like getting some of the sets done. So I just showed up and was like, well, time to go to work. And I just like took off my nice shoes and put on my work boots and took off my nice jacket and stuff. And I just went out and grabbed a paintbrush and just started like doing stuff. And I always joke that they hadn't fully finished the window that's in the hallway. And you'll see it like when Jill first walks down the hallway, and then they have like Hunk and the other Umbrella Soldier in the hallway firing. They have the window there that's from the game. And originally that didn't even have the grid in it. They were a little bit behind. So I was the one to actually put the grid in, because I was like, yeah, you need to be like very gridded, very fancy looking. So I went and made that really quick. I I finished their lab set for them, and just did like
That's so
I
cool.
went outside and cut down like part of a tree and then like put it outside the window of that hallway. So
Yep.
when they would light it, it would actually like
cast
give a
the
little bit of
shadow
movement.
and
This is
So,
like guerrilla style
Yeah.
That is
filmmaking.
so
Yes,
like-
yes. This is the
yeah, I'm just there like walking around smoking, like you need a tree. You need to have layers, you know. So that was me and my like additions to the stuff. And then
that short film
and
was
then I
in
went home.
production for ages. Like fans have been waiting on it for a long time. So when it finally released, it was like,
Well,
it was
the filming for it was actually pretty quick. What took forever was doing the like 45 seconds of CGI, which you know, I know the director, I'm friends with him, you know, obviously I'm friends with JJ and M. So like I've been very frank with them, and I just said, like, you know, this is why you do practical, because
yes.
you get all the work done beforehand and then you film it on set and then you can just edit everything together. You don't need to wait for someone to create it. You know, so
And usually it's cheaper to go practical as well instead of CGI.
I actually did want to try and do a hunter for the documentary, but we ran out of time because I was like, I'm pretty sure I could do what needs to be done, like a couple like brief shots where you get to see like pieces of it. And I feel like that's the best way to do a monster like that, is don't show the whole thing. You know, I actually
Jaws style.
So I actually reused my idea that I had for the documentary. I wrote a fan script, and I originally wanted to do kind of the same thing as what the Keeper's Diary did, like fund it, go shoot it, and this would be like, hey, this is my version of a Resident Evil film. But my career's been so busy lately that I just realized like this is never going to happen. So I just released it for free, but I reused the idea, which was to have you would actually hear it, and then I wanted this shot of you would see like an arm, just a hand come around a door frame, and then you would just see like the thing sort of like leaning out, like it's
Almost like the Resident Evil 2 cover, the American Resident Evil 2
Mhm.
cover, but 100. That's
and I just kind of feel like that half face of like a sneering hunter looking out. So yeah, I have that in like a fan script somewhere that I was originally going to film, and you know, Chris is like blowing it away with a shotgun, and you know, really cool shit.
I want to backtrack a little bit on your horror film. Is this going to be released this year? Has it been released?
It is currently being edited. It's called
Okay.
Whistle to the Maples. It is.
Oh, so it's in Canada.
No.
I'm sorry, I'm joking. Continue.
It was shot in. The funny thing is, some of it was shot on the same property where we shot certain aspects of the documentary, like all the forest scenes and stuff. It's same property. Some of the people that worked on the documentary worked on Whistle to the Maples. So that's being put together. It should be finished by beginning of March. If Tom is watching this,
close.
If Tom is watching this, you will have it finished by the beginning of March.
You heard the man, Tom.
We finished everything, I think, mid-November, and then he shut down for like the holidays, and then didn't get started on putting it together until beginning of last month. And so he's making really good time. I think we have about 4 different offers for it.
Nice.
4 or 5
Like
offers.
for distribution when you say
Yeah.
offers?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And it's just based on the trailer. Or, you know, based on the performance of the documentary, where now like people are like, hey, I hear you make people money. We'd like to buy this from you.
See, that I was going to ask that, but I wasn't sure if it was an appropriate question. Did the documentary do well financially? Because I know Nadia purchased it. I rented it first. And and also, is there going to be a physical release? Or maybe there already is one, but I watched it streaming.
Okay, so I was told after the first week from the distributor that the documentary did really well. And earlier today, the European distributor, which I don't even think they've released it yet. It's all just pre-orders, but they sent me an email saying your documentary is doing extremely well for us, and we want to know what else you're working on. And that's been kind of the consensus between the two distributors is like, hey, this did really good. What else do you got? And, so I've been talking to different companies, and then there's other people that I guess are getting metrics or looking to see like what the tractions are. And they're inquiring like, hey, we've seen your documentary. What else are you working on? Because we're interested in, working with you. So I haven't gotten a lot of hard numbers. I've gotten some numbers for the first few days, but the problem is every platform reports numbers differently.
We talk about that all the time on our YouTube channel.
Amazon, iTunes, you can kind of get like a rough idea within like 24, 48 hours of how well you did that on a single day.
Yes, because some people say minutes watched, others will say engagement, and like there's no cable. It almost as if they want to
money. Yeah, I'm just talking about the money that's made.
Yeah,
it'll tell you your earnings, but like some are daily, some won't update for 30 days. Cable companies are like 90 days, so I don't even know what like Comcast is doing, because I guess you can get on Comcast in the US and like rent it from Comcast. It's like that, or Canada is Shaw and Bell are two of the cable providers, and you can rent it from there. Like they had it wherever they could get it, they put it out there. But the problem is I won't probably know until sometime in May how well this thing did. So
I mean, you're hearing good news so far.
Yeah,
and
the distributors, I guess it blew away their expectations, and the distributor wants me to go back and finally go back and re-edit and make this director's cut. So
what does that mean for a physical release then, or is there going to be any?
There's going to be a physical release probably in the next few months. Last Sunday, we filmed all of the supplementary material. So we still got to do the audio commentary, and we'll have all that stuff delivered over to the distributor. And then in a few months, you'll probably hear about wherever they want to release it. But I did hear a name attached to who's doing the physical release. And I was like, oh, that's cool. I always wanted to work with them. So that's pretty neat. But yeah, there's going to be like a very specific release company that does this kind of stuff. And so they're going to have a release for that. And then down the road will be the director's cut, because I got to go back and basically snip apart the whole documentary and kind of rework some stuff. We're probably going to go shoot some new things for it and rework some of the material to kind of address some of the issues that I had with it. So it's like you can buy the damn Blu-ray. It's not like the director's cut's going to come out like a week later. It's going to be a little bit of time, but
everybody watching this, buy everything. Buy the Blu-ray, buy the director's cut, buy the digital.
I will say this much. This isn't me as like a businessman speaking. This is me as a fan. And it was something that dawned on me, and mostly through talking to other fans who really liked the documentary. As far as I'm aware, I'm the first Resident Evil fan to create a commercial product that got a license from Capcom.
Actually, I gotta give you something sort of anecdotally funny about that. 10 years ago, I was part of a project that was doing a non-for-profit fan game, and even that was shut down by Capcom, even though it was completely free and not for profit. So yeah, that Capcom is very stingy with the IP, and for good reasons, because we've seen bastardizations and whatnot. So yeah, it would not surprise me if you were the first.
So, but I mean, it's a kind of a big deal because it's sort of opened a door now. So I would imagine that the documentary needs to do well, because that will probably show Capcom, like, here's a fan who didn't just go off and do a fan thing. He actually created a professional product that got sold and got distributed, and if it's doing well for making Resident Evil look good, that would hopefully, I would assume, might make Capcom more willing to work with other fans who can come in as professionals with really strong ideas and a good business plan to get something out there. So, but it would probably have to continue doing well. You know, if there's people out there just pirating it because they don't want to pay for it, well, it's like, well, yeah, you got to watch it for free, but you're also hurting the fan base because maybe you don't want to do anything creatively, but what if one of your buddies that you're talking to online always wanted to do, I don't know, a fucking comic book or something, and you know, he's really skilled but doesn't know how to get a hold of Capcom. Maybe something in the future, because the documentary is doing well, maybe Capcom's going to be like, you know, maybe we need to hire more fans that actually have the professional skills and training instead of working with corporations all the time. Maybe these fans will know how, you know, I know it's very idealistic, but it's
no, I don't think it's idealistic at all. And I think this is specifically an Eastern concept because it's not just Capcom doing this. Not too terribly long ago, I don't know how familiar you are with Sega or Sonic the Hedgehog, but Sega had been porting games from their original Genesis to like mobile devices and other consoles, and they've been shit. And fans were complaining about how terrible they were. And so a few fans got together and they made their own from the ground up mobile ports of these games, put them on the Apple Store, Google Play, the whole nine, and for profit. They sold them even though they didn't have a license or anything. And instead of Sega taking it down or whatnot, they said, oh no, this fan product is selling more than our original shit. Let's hire them. And they are now full-time employees. And so again, Sega, Japanese company, Capcom, Japanese company. I think this is more of an Eastern mentality than what we have in the West. So I think you're onto something.
And unfortunately, I don't think, you know, not all fans and their talents are created equal, but I do think that, like, look at the stuff that's being created though, especially on lower budgets. The fan base is killing it. So you're going to have to go in as a professional. You're going to have a business plan. You can't just say, you know, me and my high school buddies are going to go make something. Like, you need to show that you have the capability to deliver something and get it sold as a product on a market and be able to earn revenue. But I think the fan base has really good potential. And, you know, that's with every fandom that's out there. And what's really cool to see is when the fans end up crossing that boundary, because you see that with things like Star Wars, and you see that like Alex, Alex, who did Itchy Tasty, the unofficial history of Resident Evil. He started back in like Game Facts, you know, doing like walkthroughs and stuff. And then ever since he did the interview and the documentary, he went on working on Clock Tower Rewind, which was released through Capcom. So it was like, wow, like, this is really cool to see how, like, where people started at years ago and like where they are now. And it was a really cool moment to hear that Alex was working on a Capcom property with Clock Tower. So, you know, that was neat.
So as both somebody in the movie making business as well as a fan, this may be too broad or unprofessional questions, so feel free not to answer, but have you been seeing the disconnect between fans and sort of the Hollywood machine of what we've been getting lately as far as products go, whether it be things like Star Wars, which you mentioned, or superhero movies, or any sort of like homogenization to where general audiences are craving something with more authenticity, like what you gave with this documentary?
I mean, you do see that things have kind of shifted a little bit. You know, the comic book films are starting to feel more like comic books. You know, you can look at just with like James Gunn delivering characters that have these really ridiculous costumes, but they work. He somehow makes it work in the film. And you're seeing more of the Marvel superheroes kind of merging into more comic accurate takes compared to, you know, 20, 30 years ago. Video game adaptations. Look at The Last of Us, Fallout. Even Twisted
Best show
Metal.
of 2024 was
You know,
Fallout,
actually,
in my-
I really like Twisted Metal. You know, I wasn't sure where they were going with it, and then by the last like 2 or 3 episodes, it was like, holy shit, this is Twisted Metal. Like, they just had like a whole mass brawl in their vehicles for the climax of Twisted Metal, and it was like, holy shit, that's just like the game.
I heard a lot of fans love Twisted Metal. I didn't have seen it, but that's the sign about. Again, it's a good sign for like
You know, and
following the source material.
I think if you know they continue that avenue, I think it's going to be a very good shape. And I know we have to soon go here. I just wanted to say that I get to experience that now because last year I actually bought the rights to the horror video game Faith, the Unholy Trinity, which just had its release on Nintendo Switch back in October. So that was actually announced back in December for the film. And, you know, we've already been covered by Bloody Disgusting, Fangoria. I actually saw an article in Famitsu in Japan. So it was very weird to see something that's about this movie. But it'll be, I'm directing it. Tom, who's the cinematographer on the documentary, he's going to be cinematographer on Faith. We have George Demick is an executive producer. We brought in Steve Barton from Terrifier 2. He's executive producer. And the screenplay will be written by John Esposito, who won an Emmy on The Walking Dead. And he also wrote Graveyard Shift and did some episodes of Creep Show, episodes of Masters of Horror. He helped produce From Dusk Till Dawn. So we're starting to get some names attached here. So
the Stephen King film Graveyard Shift. I know that sounds familiar.
Where have you been?
I did a quick Google. Holy shit! Wow, that's crazy.
I'm a huge King head. I have got all of his first edition books behind me. And this
when I've actually gotten to meet John Esposito. I met him at Living Dead weekend. George Demick and him have been friends ever since, you know, the 80s or around about that. And you know, obviously John wrote the script for Graveyard Shift when Demick was originally attached to it. And so we brought him down, and the first thing that John said to me was, he said, "I can't wait to see your documentary." Like, that was really cool. So me and him hit it off well, and we all got to have dinner at the end of the weekend. And I was like, I really want to work with you, John. And I must have pestered him for like 2 months because I'm like, listen, I know you worked on Graveyard Shift for a couple years, and you know, there's a lot of like changes. You know, I hear George always talking about the changes. I was like, do you still have the original script? And he's like, yeah. I was like, could I have that? Like, could you send me a copy? I want to read the original script. So I actually got to read it. It was really cool. It's really cool to see like the changes from what they wrote to what ended up in the film. But no, we're all like working on it. You know, the team's been really well. The creator of the games is involved. He's actually
you should have led with that, because that's something that makes fans of adaptations very nervous, is how involved are the original creators. That is a
I won't say like who I all beat out on this. Apparently there was like some Hollywood level people that really wanted this property.
And, dude, if you beat out Hollywood level people, fucking based.
We're fans already. We're fans.
And I beat them out. The creator of the game actually summed it up that you know, all of these like Hollywood people wanted to talk about how they were going to change the game in order to meet certain metrics and you know, sell it as a certain thing. And you know, and he realized like there's just no way that these people are right for this, because
you would think Hollywood would have learned that lesson by now, because it's been 30-ish years of bad
it's all metrics. It's all metrics. You know, how wide of a release can we get this? What's the widest audience that we can get it in front of? And Faith is very much like an A24 horror film that delivers on like the gore. You know,
Is it
it's
A24
like,
and not it just got wet? I can feel it.
you know, it's it's
As long as
very
it's
much.
not Blumhouse.
It's like a very weird, like Long Legs meets Hereditary meets Exorcist 3 meets The Evil Dead. Like it's just a very weird mix.
Exorcist 3 underrated, right?
Sign me up already.
There's a lot of elements of it that feel like a 8-bit Resident Evil type game, because you're going around these locations, solving puzzles, fighting monsters, and reading a lot of documents to piece together the plot. So I'm like, oh, this is like there's so much that feels like Resident Evil. And so when I sat down with the creator, I told him that I really love the video game, and what I want to do is take these elements from the game and figure out how to translate them into live action. You know, the game has chiptune music, and it's like, I don't want a traditional score. Why don't we try and do something that's like a synth score like John Carpenter would do, with maybe elements of chiptune in it, to give that same unease that the game does. You know, the game is done in an 8-bit style. Well, we can't just make this thing look like a slick film in 2025. Why don't we try and shoot it like it's a film from the 80s with a lot of heavy grain,
cool.
Either 35 millimeter, or we go Evil Dead style and shoot it 16 millimeter and blow it up to 35. So I was like, so I'm talking about how we can take these certain little pieces. You know, all the voice acting in the game is like Sam. It's that like chiptune like voice acting, very electronic, and it sounds very weird. And I was like, well, we can't just do that, but why don't we try and have the demons like talk through electronic devices, and then you hear those like creepy electronic voices coming through, you know, just saying like really creepy things to you. I was like, I want to do that. I want to take pieces of the game, like how the game was made, and figure out how to translate it. Not how can we change this thing to make it something else and slap Fate the Unholy Trinity on. How do we make a movie that honors the video game and gets fans excited? There's so much cool shit in the game. You don't have to create new original stuff. It's already there. So just get it onto screen and get it in a way that is going to make fans super excited to actually want to go to the theater and watch it. And that's what I want to do. So it's a very cool story. I fucking love Faith. It's and I don't know. Plus, you know, being able to work with people I know and I'm friends with, and you know, it's super cool.
That's a big thing in film. When you find the core group of people. The first 10 years of my career doing special effects, I worked with the same people a lot of the times, because you recommend each other, because you know your worth ethic, you know you vibe very well, the chemistry there, and you all are passionate about the same thing. So it's always good to find your core group of people.
By the way, before we go, I just wanted to point out that as a Romero fan, you haven't said anything about my beautiful scarf. This is a replica of George Romero's Lucky Scarf.
That's very cool.
It was actually,
I had no idea.
I just thought it took it over my head. I thought you were just very cold.
No,
it does harken back to one thing in the documentary that made me laugh out loud, which was like I audibly laughed when they told the story of, oh no, this is just like fall in Philadelphia, or whatever he had said about being cold on set. He was wearing shorts, and I feel like I literally was like, that's so funny. Anyway, sorry, continue, but that's
this
so
was
cool.
actually made by a good friend of mine that I met at Living Dead weekend when cool. He found out I was doing the documentary. He had actually tracked down as close to the same material as possible, and it's very close. And it made me this scarf and was like, you deserve to have this. And so now I wear it everywhere to try and
you have some very rock star type friends that very much care about you, and I can tell you care about them as well. They're not just your work colleagues, just the way you beam up a little bit when you're just mentioning names that you've worked with. So you have a very good group of people.
Nadia just has like me.
I don't. Yeah, Leon, you're never coming back.
Sometimes all you need is one person. That's all you need. If you got one solid person beside you, that's you can get through anything. So yeah, I have some really cool friends, and that's what they are. They're friends and family.
Well, Brandon, thank you so much for
Thank
spending
you.
almost 3 hours with us. I would love to have you back on once your next film is released, and Lee and I can talk to you more about that. Honestly, you're welcome back anytime. If you've got anything coming down the pipeline, just let us know, and we'd love to broadcast it to the world for you.
Thank you. I'll send you the link to the teaser trailer for Whistle to the Maples because
Great.
and
I'm so excited when I get stuff like that. But before I let you plug what you got going on next, I did see that Lucy Lovebug dropped 5 of my memberships. Thank you so much, girly. I will give you, you know what? Stay still. So that being said, where can people find you, Brandon? What you got going on? Plug yourself.
I'm actually you can usually find me on Facebook. It's my name, Brandon Salisbury. And I'm also on Twitter. It's at Mr. Midnight Owl. So yeah, I'm on social media. I'm on Discord. I don't have any of the details on that, but you can usually find me in like the Faith servers. I'm in almost every Resident Evil server. So
Are you a member of ResidentEvil.org, by the way, the forum site?
Yes.
How long have you been a member?
Since I don't know, like 12, 13 years.
We may have had conversations not ever known it. Did you ever interact with somebody named Kennedy Killer? You might not remember. I don't know.
If you go into the movie section, you'll see me in there because I've been in there talking
by your
about,
name or
yeah, it'll just say Brand. It'll say BRAN, and it has my.
I'm gonna check and see if you and I may have interacted because I've been a member since like 2011 or earlier. Maybe 2009.
You can actually see on there. There might be like some of the early discussions talking about the documentary. You'll actually see posts from saying like, "Hey, I can't get into the archive for so many X amount of months." There's some shit that goes back to probably I want to say there's probably some stuff in there from 2020. I originally started the documentary back in 2019, but yeah, you'll probably see like a whole some of it's within one that's called like George's old scripts are found. Like that one's probably
Leon's gonna stalk you now.
He's like,
sure.
I'm literally checking right now. Like because it would be wild if you and I have actually talked before via our screen names.
We may have. I've been in a couple other chats, but I mostly stuck to the Resident Evil film subsection of ResidentEvil.org. But
holy shit, you were on here. I just found you. I wonder. Hold on. There's no way. Resident Evil George A. Romero's documentary.
If you go down, like there's people talking about like Bernie Wrightson's artwork. There's stuff about George's old
members since 2015. You and I were active on here that say, holy shit, you and I very well may have been talking as early as like 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
It's a small world.
I have been involved in. I used to be a member of The Horror Is Alive. Thea. I was there for many, many years until they closed that down. I was a member of BioFlames. I don't know if any of these ring a bell, but BioFlames was the site that tried to chronicle everything about the Resident Evil 2 prototype. I was a member of Biohazard Extreme. Resident Evil All-Stars. Like these are all websites that have all gone away, but I've been there. New Blood. There's New Blood. Robbie, the co-writer, that's his website is New Blood. That's an old-timey Resident Evil website. Like it's just pretty neat. There's been people that have probably seen the documentary not realizing that if they've been around the communities for 10, 20 years, they've probably interacted with me at some point.
That's cool though. As a
fellow
fan,
my mind just got blown again.
Yeah,
right, we gotta wrap
see
up.
another fellow fan.
But the thing is like I'm just a regular guy. I'm no one big. I'm just a fan who wanted to make something to show his love and appreciation for Resident Evil and George Romero. Like I'm I'm just a dude. Like I'm gonna, once we get off of here, I'm gonna go upstairs and watch TV in my townhouse. Like, you know,
Yeah,
I
but
put my.
I feel that type of people that film needs nowadays is just like
Mhm.
people who are passionate about the projects that are,
Yeah,
either they've
I
done or
won't.
handed to them.
Yeah, I won't. I tell a lot of people all the time that it always feels weird to me. Like whenever I get coverage by Fangoria or Rue Morgue or people are writing articles or talking about me, it's like it feels weird. I've had people get my autograph. I've had people pay for my autograph, and I'm like, it's weird. And people are like, "Oh, you got to get used to it." I'm like, "No, you don't understand. Like I don't want to get used to it. I
Mhm.
want it to feel weird because if it becomes something that is common, I'm not going to cherish it as much. And I always want it to feel weird. And my biggest problem is I like to talk to everyone, because I really do appreciate anyone that takes their time to watch the documentary or say nice things to me. So whenever I run into people, just like now, like I just want to talk all the time. I like talking to people that, enjoy my work. So I will have more stuff that's going on. There's probably I produced Whistle to the Maples. I have a new documentary that is going to go into production in the summer, but I can't talk about what that is just yet. Uh,
Okay.
I have Faith the Unholy Trinity, which is projected to be a trilogy of films. So we'll do one and then keep those going. And then Tom Robinall has another film that he wants to shoot next year. So if we get the funding, we're going to go try and shoot that in the winter and I'm going to produce that one as well. So what I've been trying to do is work with other people and like help finance their projects. It's not just about me. I've been trying to help out other people, other filmmakers, and
Pay it forward in a
yeah.
sense.
So
Yeah. Well, if there's anything I can ever do, send me articles, links, and stuff. I'm happy to bring them up on my live shows Tuesdays and just tweet them and just send them out. Send them out to the
Absolutely
people I
same.
still have in
thank you.
Hollywood. So, yeah, anything I can do to help. Leon, what do you got going on next?
Well, before I say what I got going on next, just want to say, you said you appreciate when people say nice things and whatnot. And I mentioned it earlier, but I'm gonna mention it again. Not too manly to admit that this documentary it truly did mean a lot to me. Just as a fan of both George Romero, fan of Resident Evil, I genuinely did tear up near the end. It just there was a lot of passion in this. You did fantastic work. I at no point thought that I'd be part of any of these discussions because I don't really do horror-oriented stuff on my YouTube. I'm more of just a culture-oriented channel, and so I sent the article to Nadia being like, yeah, you're a horror channel. Check this out. And this is all her idea. So, Nadia, thank you so much for bringing me in on this as the, again, as a zombie fan, Resident Evil fan, the whole nine. This is something I would have watched regardless of whether I was doing YouTube stuff or not. So you did a fantastic job, Brandon. Thank you for
Thank you.
making this for both Romero fans and Resident Evil fans alike. As for what I've got going on, let's see. Today is Tuesday, so tomorrow we're going to be on Gooch's show doing a review of Return of the Jedi, my personal favorite Star Wars movie. People can say what they want about it. I love Ewoks. Friday we'll be on Badger Den, and then we've got my show Neon Leon, Mike Hollow coming on, and then we will be doing a review of Galaxy Quest on Niat's channel on Saturday. So that's about my week wrapping up.
Oh, I did want to say that for any Resident Evil fans, any George Romero fans, or the one or two people that are fans of me, I will be at Creature Feature Weekend, which is being held in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, and that is at the end of March. It's like March 28th, 29th, and 30th, I believe. And then again, I will be at Living Dead Weekend, which is held at the Monroeville Mall, where they filmed Dawn of the Dead,
baby.
which will be June 6th, 7th, and 8th. So I will be at both those events. You'll usually see me walking around, wearing my vest, my scarf, my cabbie hat, and just kind of enjoying the shows. So if anyone happens to want to go to those events or is already going there, be sure to stop and say hi to me. And this year, might be the last Living Dead weekend because the Monroeville Mall was just sold to Walmart,
Yeah.
who planned to probably
I
demolish it.
read that, and
Yep.
If
if
you
Walmart
I read
has
that a
any
couple weeks-
sense,
if
they
you
will just
have
make
not
money.
been there, if you're a fan of George or Dawn of the Dead and you have not been there, I highly
is the time.
recommend people go to Living Dead weekend and see all the fans that show up to see all those people. So yeah.
Oh shit! I am Zach. I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, no, I'm sorry. There was a chat. I felt like an asshole. My bad. ADHD. Sorry.
Oh. So yeah, that's where people can find me.
Very cool. And what I'll do is I'll be updating the description with Brendan's links there, a link to the documentary as well as some information on that. So again, please go subscribe to him on X, Twitter, and check out the documentary. Even if you're not a George Romero fan or Resident Evil fan, it's just, if you're just a horror fan, you just like horror history, it's great. It just crosses all genres. So I highly recommend it. As for myself, for members only, I know I'm running a little bit late. This stream will redirect to the members only chat. And then I will be on Pop Culture Minefield talking about Warlock for our 80s Fright Night. And then back on Saturday for X-Files First Time Watch Through talking about episode 9, 8 and 9, or 9 and 10, one of the two. And then I'll be on Galaxy Quest as well. So again, please subscribe to everybody. I'll have links, and chat. You guys were amazing. Sorry I didn't pull up anybody today. I just wanted to let the conversation flow, and it was amazing conversation. So until next time, everybody, stay